last quarter. Our client solutions groups are everything just from the workstation spines, inclusive of our VDI ecosystem, grew 13% last quarter. Our VMware organization grew licenses 11% last quarter. On a trailing 12-month basis, Dell Technologies grew to $87 billion of revenue. A big number and growing at double-digit rates, literally in every geography and in every business, and it's all thanks to you. So I wanted to just say thank you. It's the partnership with you that's enabling our team members to spend time in understanding the challenges you're facing, and I'm hoping that every one of our team members is there with you, thick and thin, to ensure that we deliver the best possible capabilities to enable you to solve the key business challenges that you're seeing between your organizations and the constituencies that you work with. We're working with 99% of the Fortune 500. Our employee satisfaction rate is the highest it's ever been. Our customer satisfaction rate is the highest it's ever been. Thank you. Thank you so very much appreciated. Sessions like this is a testament that you're making the investment to come spend time with us, and I hope that every one of our team members, our 170,000 around the world, reciprocate every day to ensure that your success is the most important thing that they wake up every morning thinking about. My transition, thank you. Thank you very much, appreciate it. It's actually going so well that Michael's thinking about taking the company public again. I mean, so you saw that in the news maybe. So interesting transitions. It doesn't change what we do. It'll enable us to go even faster and hopefully serve you better. If I spend a couple of seconds on the transformations, and Steve talked about it, how do we make it real? When you're talking about the digital transformation, so how do you go from a compute-centric environment to a data-centric environment and ensure that you're investing in developing cloud-native applications that is leveraging the data, that enabling you to provide and make your team members more efficient, more productive on any infrastructure, on any operating system, in any cloud, seamlessly anywhere. That's what we do day in, day out with Pivotal Technology today. And for example, with what we do with Boomi, which does data migration, enabling you to extract the core data from your legacy applications and migrate it to that next generation native cloud app environment, accelerating again the pace of innovation, but also allowing you to be a lot more agile, allowing you to attract greater talent that wants to develop those skill sets, because those are the skill sets that are in high demand. And we'll talk a little bit more about the workforce. Goldie already teed it up. And it was a big topic of conversation last night as an example. On the IT transformation side is, again, how do we modernize, automate, and transform the environment that allows you to create and have the flexibility to go into a private cloud, on-prem, off-prem, hybrid cloud, public cloud, seamlessly at extremely attractive economic, with extremely attractive economic use cases, and be able to repatriate that data and that content anywhere, anytime, so that you're in control. You have the economics to drive the business models you want internally, and at the same time making sure that every single part of those applications and that data is secure at all times. That does require a modern, integrated infrastructure environment that is software defined across all of the parts of the ecosystem, not just around compute virtualization, but network virtualization, as well as on the storage virtualization side, and then seamlessly working together and seamlessly integrated into all of the cloud ecosystem. And you see that in what we do with every one of our core product solution groups, as well as in our partnerships with VMware. If you then think about workforce, and Steve talked about it, the workforce is getting, in some cases, older, but in some cases, clearly, a millennial group that has a very different form of working. They want to work anytime. Again, they want to have access to that information. They want to have access to those applications seamlessly, anywhere, anytime. We also want at the same time make sure we're protecting information that is now flowing ubiquitously around the globe. How do we do that effectively and efficiently? 65% of the workforce that's coming in today say they won't go work for a company that doesn't provide them with the capabilities that enables them to learn and enables them to be efficient and effective at the job they're doing. So technology is what enables that to happen. So things that we're doing within our environment literally starts from the basics of what is the look and feel of the facilities that we have. Is it an environment that looks and feels like a software development collaboration ecosystem that they want to be part of? First half of this year alone, we added, just in my organization, 1,900 new team members, net new team members. The distribution of that from a diversity standpoint was 50-50, male, female, and a high proportion of that, about 30 to 40% of that, were new hires from our college recruiting programs. It's a great group of talent, highly diverse, great set of ideas, thinking outside the box, as we talked about, and first and foremost with the mindset of, I want to collaborate to solve business problems. And that's the same profile that we're using when we're hiring people within our Pivotal Labs environment. It's fascinating when you talk to the team that a majority of the people they bring on to do software development don't have a software degree or a computer science degree. Their mindset is, let me get the personality that's going to best work in this environment, collaborate not only internally, but also is able to sit next to the developers of our customers and be able to think differently, be able to solve problems differently, and we can easily translate that into a software product and an application that solves the problem that we're trying to drive. A different workforce that has different expectations that we need to cater to, because ultimately this is the lifeblood for every one of us. And how do we be able to attract? How are we able to retain and train all our people going forward? Security cuts across the board, everything from your watch for your devices to a software-defined network with NSX. Isn't it great when you have an environment where a network only exists when it's transporting information, doesn't exist otherwise, hence it'd be harder to infiltrate. You can do identity management with RSA. You can create your own security center with RSA, or you can have us do it for you with SecureWorks. The portfolio has come together very nicely. We still got work to do, but the way we want to drive that change, continuous change within our environment, is to make sure that it's aligned best to the needs that you have versus us pushing the technology to you without that understanding, okay? If I now transition to some of the things that we did with the infrastructure or Innovation for the Future Labs. Again, thinking about 2030, thinking about what are some of the policies that we all need to adopt in order to best position ourselves for success together. Here are the four pillars that we had. The first one was around trust. Again, we moved from a compute-centric to a data-centric environment. The second was, once you have the data, how do you then foster innovation with that information? Third, how do you then drive a workforce that is ready to be able to drive that innovation? Last but not least, how do we all do this together in order to sustain an environment that we're all going to be proud to be part of, and it's always going to drive for human progress the right way. So if you think about it from a data perspective, we want to promote data privacy and cybersecurity via voluntary compliance with open and global standards. We want to make sure that we utilize standardized agreements among governments to resolve cybersecurity and data privacy conflicts of law and jurisdiction. And lastly, we need to make sure that we implement smart open platforms that allow government data to be shared and innovation to be fostered across the board while safeguarding privacy. There's a lot more to it. I think there were 18 points that we discovered as we went through this process. I just picked a handful that I wanted to relay to you. And certainly our team members would be happy to spend more time with you as to what we found, and how we can translate that to actual implementation from a process perspective with you. Once again, we've got the data covered, and we've got the data sovereignty covered, and how we manage it, and how we create a trusted environment of sharing that information. Because almost in every agency I go to, or in every department I go to, especially in the government sector around the globe, the need to be able to absorb the information you already have, to be able to share the aggregate intelligence that you already have, to then be able to translate that into predictive analytics of future behaviors of either individuals or processes or institutions. That's where Nirvana starts to come together. So then how do you take and foster that information and drive innovation with that information? So provide a favorable regulatory, and I've heard this loud and clear from many of you, regulatory and procurement framework to foster new competition and disruptive business models across the board, not just in industry, but also in government. How do you transfer more of the government IT into a cloud-centric world? Again, either on-prem, off-prem, private, hybrid, or public clouds, and make that transition of information seamless across the board, similar to what I talked about when I talked about our IT transformation initiative. How do we encourage free and open trade and stop any kind of trade barriers being implemented? Near and dear to our hearts this day and age, obviously. And how do we adopt competitive, fair, and transparent tax policies for businesses to invest in innovation, infrastructure, and training? The data will drive the ability to manage innovation, foster that mindset across the board within our environments, and then how do we then support and create a workforce that is able to leverage that and grow that and make that part of their ongoing development. Part of the research showed that 85% of the types of jobs we're going to have by 2030 don't even exist today yet. So how are we going to plan for a workforce when the job, 85% of the jobs we will have 12, 13 years from now have not yet been defined? Clearly requires that we provide technology literacy as a base foundational element of that. It ensures that we need to focus on STEM, critical thinking, communications, as part of that. But we also should expect that this workforce is going to partner with machines to learn while they're on the job and in the moment. Different than what we see and do today. And last but not least, I already talked about it, this workforce needs to utilize data analytics, virtual reality, augmented reality, to be able to personalize their learning and their development. Different from what we see today, for sure. And then last but not least, and this is a responsibility for all of us, is to ensure that we work with businesses to ensure that emerging technologies are driving what we're doing from a smart cities perspective. This is a conversation, especially in Asia, especially some of the emerging markets in the Middle East. The investments and initiatives around better serving the population with a digital transformation mindset across every part of government is enormous, and the investments are enormous. We want to leverage AI, ML, and predictive analytics to promote smarter mobility, safety, energy, water, healthcare, waste management across the board. We want to promote and develop procurement and use sustainable goods, taking into account the whole product life cycle and circular economy principles across the board. Last but not least, and I'll leave you with this, we all want to advance human progress, and we want to do it through innovation, we want to do it through technology. It's a big part of what we and Michael have been pushing to ensure that we drive economic development, we drive innovation, we drive inefficiencies around the globe, create a growth economy, create jobs for our young team members that are coming on board. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that we help ensure a more sustainable and prosperous world going forward together through technology. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Really appreciate the invitation, Goldie and Steve. You all have an unbelievable set of speakers coming up. You have amazing content. I can't remember last time I've seen this kind of lineup. It's going to be busy, but you're going to enjoy the day. Thank you so very much for inviting me over to come spend time with you.
Thank you, boss. That was fantastic. I personally just learned quite a bit from that. I wanted to take just a second here during transition to thank all of our business partners and sponsors for this event. Without these folks, we don't go to market. Without these folks, we don't share intellectual property that allow us to create some of our most valuable propositions in this marketplace. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsors, Booz Allen Hamilton, Red River, CDWG, VMware, and FutureTech. I'd like to thank our platinum sponsors, Broadcom, FedData, Ironbow, NVIDIA, Worldwide Technology, and ID Technologies. Our social media sponsor today is Carasoft. Thank you. Silver sponsors, FCN Technology Solutions, Norseman Defense Technologies, Impress Technology Solutions, Sterling, and Ingram Micro. Also our global sponsors, Intel and Microsoft. Our solution showcase sponsors are Deloitte, Informatica, Nutanix, and Vertiv. Thank you to all of our business partners and sponsors. We really appreciate your partnership.
Thank you so much, Steve. So I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker. She has a really big job, to say the least. She sets the tech agenda for the entire administration. She's newer to our community, but something that I've noticed about her that I really admire is how much she's embraced our community and how much she has been committed to working with the entire community to help improve government. She's going to be she's going to be giving us a tech update from the executive office. She's a lovely, thoughtful leader in our community and a friend of mine. Please put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to our U.S. CIO, Suzette Kent. The Dell team, and it was, as Goldie said, I'm still kind of celebrating, but not really. I'm here because, like every person in the room, I'm an American and a patriot. These are the things that we need to do. Steve almost made me cry a little bit when he talked about the fact that it takes 8 years to move some of our systems. And when we look at the technical debt that we have, that's something, that's a journey that we're all on together. I also have to say thank you to the Dell team. One of the things I'm going to talk about, as well as how we look at what jobs we need in the future and where we need our workforce to go. And one of the first things when I joined the team here that I had opportunity to do is be at the table with many of our industry leaders, including Will, who are sharing how they're forecasting and looking at the jobs for the future and ways that we can, in a public-private partnership, look at how we prepare the federal workforce to meet those same set of challenges. And to all the feds in the room, thank you for the investment here today. The magic of what these types of forums do is that you know the mission. You know the mission. You're about the mission all day, every day. And you have the opportunity in sessions like this to think about the large buffet of technology capabilities that are out there that you can bring to the mission. So your magic is matching the things that you see to what mission that you want to accomplish. And so I'm standing at the podium today. I'm usually a pacer, But there's so many things that I want to tell you about that are very exciting in the past couple of weeks. I want to make sure that I don't miss any of them. So I'm always thrilled when I'm in sessions like this where we have the talented Fed teams, our vendor partners, members of both acquisition and delivery communities, because that's an opportunity for collaboration. That's an opportunity to spark new ideas and to move faster, back to that 8-year thing that made me cry. It's also very exciting that we are here to be a Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So that keeping federal data and federal network secure is one of the most important things that I focus on every single day with all of our federal agencies. And those of you who are part of that community, thank you for being here and in the federal government. And as we talk about how we move to more modern technologies, that's also part of how we make it more secure. So to the cyber professionals that are here, to all of our technology professionals, our cyber professionals, we're going to celebrate this month. And over the past 2 weeks, the administration has launched the first national cyber strategy in 15 years. The DoD published their cyber strategy. And I've been very excited with my team to put out an update to the Cloud First, now Cloud Smart strategy, the first update in 7 years. When we talk about agile technology, we have to ensure that policy supports all the federal agencies embracing those technologies. And my team sent me with advertising for the Cloud Smart strategy. So those of you who haven't had a chance to take a look at it, please do provide comments. And those are the ways that we can help bring federal agencies to emerging technologies and leverage those to solve challenges that we're solving for mission. So I'm very fortunate to be with teams across all the federal government and talk about the commitment that this administration has to driving transformation. I hope that the announcement of those strategies, that's an important time. That's just the last 2 weeks. It's not stopping. We have more coming in the near future. And the transformation is focused on empowering that improved support of mission. We heard the team already talk about that this morning. But on the digital side, the focus is delivering high-quality services to American citizens. And we are tasked every day to be stewards, effective stewards of taxpayer money. Those are the pillars of the President's management agenda. And those are the things that we're focused on as we look at policy, technology, priorities, and investments. And for those of us who have been here a shorter time, many who've been here a longer time, it's incredibly exciting. Part of the reason I'm here right now and was excited to be part of this team, it is a unique nexus of the executive branch, our legislative branch, and industry coming together to make technology transformation a priority. And in the age that we are today, making citizen services a priority. How we serve our citizens and how we achieve our mission is the center of what we're doing. So right now we have an unprecedented opportunity to use those digital capabilities and well-proven transformational approaches to deliver not just on the agenda today, not just to deliver something that is going to have impact to a citizen, to a mission in the next 6 months, but for the future. Our conversations about data and the investments that we're making in data right now, that is our power for the future. That's also one of the things that's of most critical importance to me. It's one of the reasons I'm one of the sponsors of the Data Cap Vault. That foundation creates the opportunity for us to continue to be global leaders as we use AI, deep learning, and other advanced technologies in the future. But we have to make that infrastructure investment in data now. It's also interesting, today is a historic event. You might be thinking, it's a historic event. This afternoon, many or each of you should be getting a text message from the President. We're testing the emergency notification system today. That in itself, think about that for a second. That in itself is a testament to how digital and mobile is a connectivity point between citizens and government. As I was driving here in the car, I was kind of looking at the street, watching people walk by, and as I'm watching individuals, I just started counting. I ask about 25 people. More than half of them are walking. That shows what our American population looks at and what types of things that we have to do in the way that we connect to people. So to achieve mission, enhance citizen services, and demonstrate the stewardship that I referenced, what the administration is doing is continuing to take the steps through funding priorities, through law, and innovative levers like working capital funds to position not just for today, but for tomorrow. So I'm going to share something from my past. When I reflect on my near three decades, it's scary to say that up here, 3 decades in the financial services industry, in 2011, the financial services industry had a fundamental industry shift, with digital, mobile, and transformation were the highest priorities. J.D. Power told us in 2016, through the customer survey satisfaction study, it evidenced that the most significant improvement in how customers felt about the services they were receiving were due to the digital transformation commitments. It was also really interesting in that same survey, there was a significant decrease in costs. And the adoption rate was the same across all segments, So I translate that to some of the things that we're trying to do. Prioritizing the expectations of the people that we're serving and making that a critical part of what we're delivering. Aggressive focus on digital transformation, delivering an improved customer service in everything that we're doing, keeping the customer in the conversation, and not just having a project mentality and that it's done and we walk away, but a continuous evolution dialogue. What's next? What's next? What's next? That's how we work in the cyber world. That's how we have to work as we deliver services. And in addition, a proven path for operational costs. So when I make that comparison, it sounds a lot like what we're doing. And it sounds a lot like a proven path. And there's opportunity for us to move faster. You heard Steve say it. I say it in every forum. That's the reason that I value opportunities like this. We have to move faster. One of the other points that was touched on is we look at what's the future. And we look at our investment in workforce. When we look at the World Economic Forum, they just put out a forecast for jobs of the future. I'm going to read you the top 5 things that impact economic growth that are most important in jobs. Top 5, there's a longer list, but these are the top 5. Increasing adoption of new technology, increasing availability of big data, advances in mobile internet, advances in artificial intelligence, and advances in cloud technology. 5 main things. Sounds like why we're here today, right? So what you're doing in your investment in time today is of critical importance. I talked about the President's management agenda. I'll highlight one other thing that is a specific commitment. That's CAP Goal 4, improving customer experience with federal services. So that's not just using the tools. That is a commitment to the tools, but it's also another commitment. It's a commitment to ongoing dialogue with customers and setting up mature ways to interface with customers. That doesn't mean go out one time and have a conversation. That means how we continuously collect feedback and we measure what we're delivering based on how we are pleasing the customers. And that we have a continuous evolution. And most of you who have been part of digital transformations know that the move quickly and pivot and evolve is part of development life cycle. Listening to customers, and that is of critical importance. So I'm going to hit a couple of the highlights. So some of the things that particularly in the Office of the Federal CIO and in my partnership with the leadership at all of the agencies, the things that we're focused on to try to lay the guidance, set priorities, and have policies that will enable everyone in this room to take advantage of the technologies that are available and move more quickly. I already talked about Cloud Smart. What's different about that is not just the commitment to leveraging leading technology, but the commitment that workforce training has to be a part of those engagements, and educating our acquisition workforce is critical in that path to moving more quickly. We're releasing updates on cybersecurity, particularly around FISMA. Many we are looking at moving from advancing some of the internet connectivity so that we can actually be more flexible and improve network traffic. We are redefining high-value assets and really looking at the data assets that we have and ensuring that our protection and our focus extends to those. And we are enhancing the federal identity credentials. I was with the team last week, we were talking about that. Identity and the strength of our identity and access credentials are so critical in a digital world. And we have to advance those in a manner that lets us use more advanced technology. So how the agency sees this monumental opportunity is an everyday event. It starts with conversations like you're going to have today with all the speakers, and with the lessons that they're going to share and success stories that they're going to share with you. But I want to actually share a few things that have already been accomplished. So the best way to inspire around what we're doing is to share those success stories. Last night I was lucky enough to be at the Sammy Awards. So that's a big event that celebrates achievements in public service. If you want to, and when we, there were things that ranged from fighting new diseases to tracking criminals, all types of things. But one of the big winners was a digital transformation at the Veterans Association. Consolidating websites, bringing together resources, and finding ways that help veterans find the services that they need more quickly. That was one of the key things that we celebrated, the massive digital transformation. I've talked about the President's Management Agenda. If you haven't had a chance to read those priorities, it's on performance.gov. But when you get to that website, first thing you're going to see is a video about a small business and how through transformation that the SBA has done, that business was able to substantially grow their business. He's from Pecos, Texas, so I really enjoy his accent. But how his business and his life was affected by the digital transformation that the Small Business Administration helped to enable him. You know, I've spent a lot of time out in the field with various consumers. Take a look as well as what we're doing on farmers.gov and the things with the commitment that Secretary Perdue has made. But when you actually look, there's services after services consolidated being added. Those are just a few of the stories. Those are the ones that I can point you to and you can walk out and you can look at today. I know there's many other stories in agencies. Success is happening right now. Take opportunities like today to figure out how we drive more and how we drive it faster. So through the President's Management Agenda, the administration, and the attention to technology leadership and the bipartisan support of our technology agenda in Congress, we have an unprecedented opportunity. And we have the opportunity with many of our partners to bring in those capabilities and continue to move more quickly. American citizens have digital experiences every single day. All those people that I talked about, you know, walking, looking at their phone, figuring out how they move from place to place, getting their news, connecting with their families, consuming various services. That forms the foundation of what they expect. And what we deliver from the government should meet that high bar. And we have the opportunity now to meet that bar. So when your phone beeps today and you get the text message from the President, pause and think about what that means, about how important digital channels are in the lives of every American. And think about what your role is in continuing to deliver services much more quickly and more impactfully to our entire citizenship. So I thank you all here today for your contribution, for listening to me, to letting me connect some of the ideas to what the administration priorities are. And I ask you, as you listen for those things that are going to help you move more quickly on the journey and that are going to help you better bring back tactics to serve the individual mission of your agency. And thank you.
Suzette, thank you for your inspirational and brilliant leadership. I think you've done more to demystify some of the most difficult challenges that we face together than anybody before you. And I think that speaking on behalf of industry, you're opening the door for our commercial capability in government to come together as partners and make a lot of progress. I also want to thank you for the heads up, because I know my daughters are going to call me today and say, Dad, the president just texted me. Now when I see those phone calls coming on, I know what's going on. It's now my privilege and honor to invite to the stage Lieutenant Colonel Nadine Nally, who's the commander of the 781st Military Intelligence Battalion, Cyber. Okay. 14, check. 13 and 13, please. How about number 1? I think number 1 will be more suitable for the colonel anyways. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. You see, we just, like 13, they said that's kind of the number. We need to give her number 1, so done. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today. We know that you have one of the most challenging jobs in government. And if I can just jump right into the first question. I'm going to say that cybersecurity moves fast, and cyber adversaries are quick to adapt. Understand? You've seen that firsthand as protection team leader with the U.S. Army cyber team. How would you characterize the continued evolution of cyber threats over the past 6 to 12 months, and how will that guide your approach in your new role as battalion? That is a tuber. Yes. Could we make sure, well, I can just hand you this one. You know that.
Okay. So my most recent job prior to taking the battalion command this past August was I was a team lead for a national cyber protection team up at Fort Meade, Maryland. So it's one of the 4 national cyber protection teams that support the Cyber National Mission Force. So we're essentially a reaction elite force, or action arm to the CNMF. I would argue that it's really hard to characterize the threats over such a short window, 6 to 12 months, but I guess looking back at the last year, some of the trends that we've seen would be academic research, personal information. Those are the ones that seem to be the most marketable and profitable. However, I like to take a look back at the last decade. So if we look back at the last decade, we're able to establish the trends that we've seen. We're able to paint a wider picture on how those cyber threats have changed. So it's gone from the targets that we've had, they've remained constant. But what we're seeing from cyber actors are, they're looking to have those tactical gains, those operational outcomes, and those strategic consequences, basically. So also I would argue that a lot of the cyber actors, they've become a lot more patient. So they're looking at opportunities for protracted outcomes that support those strategic objectives. So from a military perspective, some of our military targets, SICR, so critical infrastructure, key resources, those assets still remain threats of interest or targets of interest for our threat actors, but they have a different mindset. So their patterns, their behaviors have changed. So what they're doing, they're holding those targets at risk, and they're at a specific place in time, they're making the decision to deliver that tactical effect in order to achieve the overarching operational and strategic objectives that they have. Globally, I think cyber threats have moved from disruptive. So we think of things like a simple DDoS attack to destructive. So German steel mill to Stuxnet to Saudi Aramco to now it's we think of opportunities for cyber for profit. So we have Home Depot, Target, OPM, the hacks with OPM, also with ransomware. And then the fact of the matter is cybercrime has become a for-profit enterprise. So 4 years ago, it was estimated that cybercrime would cost the global economy $150 billion. Today, I think that estimate has risen to $600 billion. So to get after this alarming trend, I think we would welcome or it would behoove us to have a whole of government approach in looking at that problem set. And saying all of that, I forgot the second part of the question.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that you hit a lot of it. How does that guide your approach as you do relative to training?
Okay, so as the national CPT lead, I looked to the battalion commander that was in place to, number one, give me the people, the technically smart people that I needed to accomplish the mission, to give me the equipment to achieve that technical solution that they were looking for, and to train us. So basically to provide the training that we need to get after the mission. As battalion commander, I will ensure, or I will work to ensure that we have the training that's necessary to do our mission. As an example, this past August, I sent out a team, Army Cyber Command was able to fund and give us some slots to send some folks out to Black Hat and DEF CON. And the return on the investment there is, they came back to my battalion, and we, through instituting professional development opportunities, they provided those lessons learned in that form back to my force. So we're able to see from a private sector, the industry, key experts, the lessons that they learned, they brought that back to my battalion, and we fold that into how we get after the mission. In order to stay ahead of those threats, we have to look at it from a prevention and being more proactive with how we attack the problem set versus being responsive and reactive. So that's important to us, and I believe, going back to the whole of government approach, being able to partner with private sector, being able to partner with industry, and from a whole of government perspective, I think we can look at those challenges and work collectively together.
Thank you very much. In your experience, how do you see artificial intelligence and machine learning benefiting the core areas, the Army National Cyber Protection Teams?
So I would say, not so much from a National Army Cyber Protection Team, but let's look at it from my current position as a battalion commander. So Army Cyber has the 780th Military Intelligence Brigade, who is the only brigade that's conducting offensive operations within the Army, and the 781st Military Intelligence Battalion, we conduct the National Defend the Nation mission set. So I have those teams up at Fort Meade that conduct offensive operations. And while my scope as a battalion commander from a readiness perspective is to provide a trained and ready force to the Cyber National Mission Force in order to achieve that unity of effort. So that's incredibly important. And that readiness reflects my team's ability to, one, plan, to develop, to gain those accesses, to report, to maneuver in cyberspace, and to hold targets at risk in order to deliver that desired technical solution when we're called upon to do so. So that's important to us. Because our soldiers and our civilians within our organization, they're operating within such a complex environment, I believe opportunities for AI, for machine learning, they're out there. If there's an opportunity where we can enlighten me as a commander on behaviors that I maybe had not seen before, on mental health issues that I had not seen before, on routines from a day-to-day perspective for my soldiers, I think that would be an incredible leap for us. Additionally, I feel like there's opportunities from an Army-wide perspective. We can institute augmented reality games where a soldier can download or use it on their mobile devices, and that can help from a physical readiness and a morale perspective, as well as a work-life balance. So if we're able to look across the board at how we streamline or create efficiencies within readiness, from an AI machine learning perspective, I think that would be awesome. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but the reality is that readiness for the Army is our #1 priority, because we have to be ready to fight tonight. So we're a little bit ahead of not ahead of ourselves, but we're a little bit risk adverse when it comes to that. We're not willing to assume risk in that domain. So I will leave it to the commanders and the staff at big Army level to figure out the right solution that will help us depict readiness.
Well, thank you. So in summary, just so far in the conversation, you see the threat evolving rapidly, and increasing because the bad guys are getting better at their job. Simultaneously, you're working to scale your workforce, your team, your soldiers in many ways to keep them ahead of the threat. And then you're looking to harness new technologies that are emerging on a real-time basis and bring that to bear on the problem. Is that a fair summary so far?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do you have a recent cyber initiative that your team is undertaking that you could share to help our audience and other agencies improve their efforts in cyber stance?
So we have two unclassified initiatives that we're working with the Department of Defense from, actually that will be kind of going back to machine learning with Project Maven. So let's focus on, from a cyber stance perspective, we don't have any that I'm able to discuss in this forum. But I feel like cybersecurity is an individual sport. It's an individual responsibility. We have to protect ourselves and protect those who are on the network with us. So I suspect everyone in this room is pretty cyber savvy, right? So I gave birth to my son 5 months ago, and in those 5 months, the iOS updates come out. I believe, he turned 5 months yesterday. I've updated my phone 4 times since he's been born. So we can say, if you're doing due diligence, you're updating your phone when you get that notification to put your cell phone into your power jack and be connected to a Wi-Fi network, right? So that's part of it. But also, do you patch your computers when you're told to do so? Or from a cyber threat perspective, do things like don't click on that email attachment when it comes from a stranger? So those are like little things that we can be doing. But I think the more important issue is what types of discussions are we having with the younger generation? So our children. When your children's friends come over to your house, are they on your Wi-Fi network? And if they are, what are they introducing into your network? So that's really important because you don't know what vulnerabilities are out there. Additionally, how many of you guys are logging onto your routers and updating your firmware? So those are like some opportunities that are out there that you can increase your personal internal cyber stance. But as far as what the battalion and what the brigade is doing, there's not really a lot of initiatives that from a perspective that I'm able to unpack.
Great. Well, those were a couple of questions that made me feel a little uncomfortable.
Mission accomplished.
There's probably been 200 high school kids that have had access to my network. Okay. All right, new network. Okay, everybody knows that cyber workforce is the hot button across defense and federal civilian agencies. What are you doing to attract talent and to make sure that we have adequate supply of human resource for cyber?
So how we attract talent, I would say it goes all the way back up through the Army, the Department of Defense. But from an Army cyber command perspective, I think we have a really robust talent management system in place. So we have opportunities there to increase our presence at recruiting fairs. Additionally, by and through the Department of Defense and the Department of the Army, there's opportunities to do direct hiring authority for some of those civilians. So we go out to colleges and universities and we look for that talent and we bring those guys back. Additionally, the Army has a pilot program, a direct commissioning pilot program where we're able to, if we recognize talent, we're able to commission them into the military as a second lieutenant. And to date, I believe we have 2 that have been commissioned as cyber officers in the military, and we are continuing to assess more. Additionally, something that's unique to the cyber force is that we have the opportunity to not segregate, but we have the opportunity because we have a work role called 17 series for our Army personnel, our military personnel, who are able to be tracked throughout their career as a cyber expert. So that stabilization, that opportunity to get after cyber, they're not forced to leave that career field and go do other things. So we're able to retain that talent within the Army, if that makes sense.
Well, your approach makes an awful lot of sense. It's very insightful. I've got to imagine that as you're minting cyber experts, that they are incredibly high demand from private industry, and of course, you have to have a lot of devotion to the mission and to your country to stay and make significantly less money than you're able to make in the private sector at any moment. So I have to imagine it's a tremendous challenge to retain that talent and to train them up.
Absolutely, and I think it's just a matter of the desire to serve, because you're right, no one's in the military or in the army for the dollar sign. I mean, at all, definitely not me. So, I'm eating more than noodles, no, just kidding, but, no,
They're delicious.
no, it's a desire to serve, have a higher calling, for sure.
We have a great appreciation for that. This has been a really fantastic talk, other than the fact that I'm feeling a little paranoid now. Is there anything else that you'd like to impart to the audience prior to exiting the stage?
No, I think just recognizing, we from an Army perspective with Army Cyber Command, we are always looking at partnering with the private sector, with industry, in order to figure out how we can enhance some of the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we have within our force. So I look forward to working with some of you guys in this room in some of our future efforts.
Colonel, thank you so much. Let's go to the
we have a disruptive technologies panel with some great speakers. We have the CTO of the U.S. Air Force, Frank Konieczny. We have the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Acquisition in the Office of the IT category at GSA. Keith Nakasones. We have Michelle Ford-McGee, who's the VP of Public Sector at Virtustream, and the moderator is the very fabulous Cameron Cherry, who's the CTO and VP of Federal at Dell EMC. Please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to our panel.
Mic checks, good, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Those of you that have know me, I have a little bit of history to make things very fun. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with the panels today. We did do a prep session. We're not going to worry about any of these questions. All right, thank you. I'm honored to be up here with these disruptors because when we look at the history of the missions that you all serve and the brilliant things that you're doing, really it is a testament to not only the disruptive technology, but how you guys make it real every single day. So I want you to just quickly introduce yourself first of all, the agency you work with, and we'll jump right into some questions.
I'm Keith Nakasone, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Acquisitions in the IT category, GSA.
I'm Frank Konieczny, the Air Force CTO.
Perfect. Let's jump into some questions. We talked about making it real, and both of you gentlemen have a history of really helping your mission spaces. Keith and I looked at just some of the early work that GSA has been doing with you, starting with smart buildings and some of the other capabilities. It's not just about the technology we're talking about. It's all actually made this real, very practical with direct mission impact. Recently, though, we've noticed that you all even continue to further advance its capabilities. If you can you tell us a little bit about the innovation that GSA is currently embarking on with AI and some of the distributed ledger technology and some of the capabilities you're continuing to look at from a disruptive perspective?
Sure. Back in July of 2017, we actually started an effort with the distributed ledger technology and started a proof of concept to actually look at the acquisition process and how we could leverage the technology to further advance, lower the administrative burden, look at how we do the business process, and also the data. And so when we started to look at the technology itself, we said, let's reimagine what we can do through the acquisition process. So we led a contract, and I can say that we actually did a competitive action for a proof of concept, very small dollar amount to get us started, to see if the microservice would actually work, and if we could take a part of the service for the acquisition process and actually implement it and see how it would work in a proof of concept environment. I can say that we're in the second phase. The proof of concept went well, so we started the second phase, which we call the pilot, and we started that this past year, and we are actually, no kidding, taking our acquisition, one of our acquisition processes, converting it into a microservice and see how it would run, and actually integrate with our existing systems. So we are undertaking that as we speak. So we're in that pilot phase right now. We also will embed the robotic process automation and artificial intelligence on top of it as well.
Can you give the audience a kind of a time metric? So in a classic acquisition strategy that you would use, if you could couch that to understand some of the transformational results you've seen in that, just even in the programs like the pilot. Prior acquisitions, what would the timeline typically look like, maybe a rough cost, and then what do you look to project to save or see from an efficiency gain?
So before, with the emerging technologies and with any kind of technology, we saw that a lot of times things happen with analysis to paralysis. So what we did was we said, well, let's reimagine what we can do within the acquisition process and start small, and don't try to boil the ocean overnight. So that's key when we start looking at the acquisition process as well as putting solutions together. So we don't want to just build one for us. What we would like to do is build rinse and repeat models and use cases so that we would be able to put rapid acquisitions together so that we can start these pilots quicker, faster, and also easier way to buy the emerging technologies.
So speed, agility, we heard Steve talk about speed, mission, value.
Absolutely.
Marius echoed those comments as well. I'm going to move on, Frank, to you. I always enjoy our conversations because you and I together are like a yin and yang. I'm always excited, and you keep me grounded in the practical reality that you have airframes flying with airmen in all over the world, and it's really about preserving the life of a warfighter. So I always appreciate our conversations. Can you give us a little bit of insight from your perspective on where the Air Force is looking to apply some or advance some of the great work you're doing, like with the F-35? I look at the RDT community, the amazing work you're applying with analytics and AI there. But advance at a macro level where you're headed with AI and ML.
Okay, this is kind of interesting because we're doing this on multiple fronts. I mean, you all know about Project Maven. I mean, that's been out there in the field. We're actually doing more sophisticated target recognition algorithms as well with machine learning and deep learning as well, that we can identify multiple targets on the drone. And that's what we're trying to get to at some point in time with new technologies. Now, also on top of that, we're doing engine maintenance and preventive engine maintenance analysis right now for some of the engines. We're actually saving money with that as well, because now we can determine when we have to maintain the engines, and also we can determine where we have to put logistics parts in the pipeline to be able to take that engine and fix it when we need it. So we're trying to fix that as well. We're doing talent management. I mean, everybody talks about, workforce. Well, we have the same problems that everybody has. And so we're figuring out how to do talent management, even from the graduates from the academy. Where's the best place to put a graduate, as opposed to putting it in the first slot that's open. So we're looking at it from the viewpoint of best education, what is their field, what they want to do, as opposed to just plopping into a position. So we're looking at that across the board as well as everything else. And let's see what else. We do a lot of machine learning with lots of data. And we're trying to do readiness right now. The Army has a pilot readiness. Synchron, you know that we actually emulating part of that pilot right now and doing some of those things as well to get to a point where we can predict readiness based upon op plans. Because that's what you have to do. It's mission related. It's not, we can't say the Air Force is totally ready for every op plan. It'd be nice. But then again, you have conflicting op plans at times. So we're trying to get down to the point of mission readiness for particular op plans and doing trade-off analysis is how you should best do that. Let's see. The other things we're probably doing is, as we go forward with more and more data analytics, we get lots of data analytics. We're trying to, the chief data officer and the analytics chief are pushing information out to the field now. And the question is, how can you use that information to support mission more than anything else? And so we're trying to figure out a standard platform that we can utilize across the board that everybody can actually buy. Also, what tool sets are necessary to do this, and the chief data officer is now pushing out requirements for us that data is data, everybody has to, it's data as a resource, it has to be used across the board. And so, quit hiding silos of data. So as we progress, we're going to see more and more of us pushing information to the mission side more than anything else right now. And that's what we're trying to do, is we always support mission. That's the whole purpose of it, right? The F-35 is interesting because the analysts come off the F-35 and they land. So we have to analyze that all the time and come across. IoT is another one. Trying to analyze IoT devices, because as you heard, there's tons of IoT now, and we have it on the basis all over the place. So the question is, how can we predict if we're having an attack against our IoT or not, based upon prior history and prior analysis? So we're doing lots of things with analytics and predictive analysis.
So it's interesting, I want to dovetail off that a little bit. You know, the Air Force received acclaimed accolades for a lot of the great work that you all been doing with the Air Operations Centers, and some of the now rapid innovation you've been able to do with like the tanker refueling applications. And I remember a private conversation we had in your office. I'm going to expose publicly. It's unclassified, I promise you. But it really struck me because, you know, you were building code so fast and so rapidly. We heard about Marius's conversation today around sustainability. And you grounded me in pragmatics about how do we make Agile sustainable from a workforce, our processes, those types of things. You offer some insight that as we look at making the code necessary for AI and ML available and continue to advance that, your sustainability thoughts.
Okay, you're talking about Kessel Run. This is very interesting because one of the first pilots we had was basically to do the tanker project. The tanker project was basically, they were doing this on a whiteboard with Excel. And it took them all day long to actually do the tanker schedule for the next day. And if they had a problem, they'd have to review the entire schedule, or they had to work all night long to get the schedule done. So we basically said, this would be a great way of looking at this and looking at some process that we automate immediately. And so they got together with real airmen who were not in the computing field. Everyone was a history major. It was really great. And they got together and figured out a way of doing this process, which is now called Kessel Run. And it worked really well. So we extended it to multiple operations as well, multiple applications right now in the operations. And that's working. Now the problem is sustainability, because you're depending upon airmen to actually do the programming work. Now the airmen are military as well as civilian. Now that's the problem, because the military have to advance and go to a different field every single year. So we're trying to figure out right now how we're going to be able to sustain the issues with the military. Civilians are easy. Civilians have been using for a while longer. The military ones are the ones. So the question comes back to us, do we want a career field of just programmers? Now we used to have one. So we're talking about bringing that back as a career field, and as you're extending it out, as necessary to have some sustainability. Now the issue with all this is that you're going to have some turnover all the time. And so the code has to be in such a way that you can pick it up and utilize it, so there's some standardization across the code. Now, that's the way some sustainability is going to be there. We go back and forth as this is like getting an ATO within a day, which is not really a day, but it's close enough that sometimes you can push out a release and automatically get an ATO based on the process that you've already done already. We are pen testing these applications to validate the process actually is providing us more secure code than we get normally. So we are playing that pretty quickly and trying to push it out. Sustainability is always going to be key to us for everything we push out. Now you're probably going to see maybe a directive from us that basically says every acquisition is going to have to have something that looks like Kessel Run on the premise. So that you want to have ATOs within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, not 6 years.
Requires a strong partnership, right?
Yes, it does, and you expect that.
So it's interesting, it really ties together the point that Marius looked at from the futures, you know, the jobs of the future may not even exist today, or need to come back, and what Ms. Kent was talking about what's the workforce need to look like in order to support the sustainability of digital transformation going forward. So Michelle, what we want to do, but it's interesting, as we look at AI and ML, right, we can create a lot of usable insights. And in nearly every situation, there's large quantities of data that are collected. They're helping us learn. We're looking at things like road patterns, and look at the brilliant work Post Office is doing with the next generation delivery vehicle. And when we look at weather conditions, all those things, the amazing work that NOAA does. But it's interesting, all of this requires infrastructure to be able to enable and empower these capabilities. They're very data intensive, right? They're placing a heavy burden on IT infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about how Virtual Stream is helping agencies prepare for this deluge of data and infrastructure that's required?
Sure, Karen, thank you. And I thought Frank was such a great statement because he teed up the whole conversation of data and it really driving the decision. But where we have been working with clients is in helping them to create a modern data platform, whether it's in technologies that doing like what you're doing with Tesla Run, but also for clients that may have SAP or some traditional type of architecture, looking to help them modernize onto a HANA platform and really give them a modern data platform, at the same time moving it into the cloud so they can then start to connect all their different data sources. Because I think what we just heard is that moving into using these modern technologies like AI, machine learning, IoT, start to integrate data from various different sources. So one of the clients that we were working with said, look, we've got 18 years of historical data, but it's sitting out in a different repository. How do we now start to connect all of those disparate sources from across the agency, from across different organizations, and really start to get it integrated? So what we help them to do is migrate into a cloud that has all the characteristics that you need, the availability, the security, all of the wrapper that you need to run your mission critical applications in the cloud. So those are some of the key points, is that the technology becomes the driver, the data is really the fuel that is driving the insights, but you need to have that base infrastructure.
So Keith, we're in a little bit of a conundrum, right? Because we're talking about disruptive technologies, things that are coming and more forward-leaning, yet I'm looking to you as a man for lessons learned, because you've been embracing this for so long as GSA. Could you share some lessons learned and insights on how you prepared the GSA infrastructure to be able to start to accommodate a lot of the great successes you've been seeing using the capabilities?
Right. So as we talked about, it's not easy to just rip and replace everything that you already have. Existing existing systems will be there. It's how do we synchronize the efforts between emerging technologies and the existing systems that we have. So I think there's a space where we can build these use cases and prototypes, if you will, or proof of concepts where we can deliver rapid acquisitions and see how it will be a solution in the future for the different lines of business. This is not a one-size-fits-all, but if we can start building those use cases, those playbooks, building templates that are repeatable within the acquisition process, we can get through the process a whole lot quicker. Industry can help as well, is when we move away from just buying a product, buying a service, buying a solution. We combine everything and we look at how we can deliver the solution in a faster, quicker, rapid way. It will help us achieve our goals in deploying emerging technologies. So one of the things that we, lessons learned when we were going through our proof of concept was, we said, hey, let's not create a whole lot of documentation or paperwork, if you will. Let's actually see if the technology can be utilized in a way where we take small parts and pieces of the process and build into it, which we come back to. Revisiting the data layer, revisiting the business process over time, and seeing where we can benefit by just reducing our administrative burden that we have with all the existing systems.
It's really key, because as we look through from industry looking to department of government, the brilliance of the strategy, you're aligning the mission with the acquisition. The acquisition, I should say, partners to the mission. Then the acquisition you're making is agile as it could possibly be.
And it's also communicating across the CXLs. Everybody has a frame of reference of what we're doing, but we understand that we have to drop it down to a plain language so that everybody understands what we're talking about. CIOs may speak a different language from the acquisition community, same with business community. So harmonizing that will pay dividends by having that early collaboration, communicating so that we will be able to meet our objectives and goals.
So Frank, I want to shift to you for a couple of lessons learned, because again, the Air Force has done some amazing things, and they can look at not just AI and ML, but the augmented reality, virtual reality things with the flight books and digital twin and all these things, as you mentioned, for the predictive logistics. What are some lessons that you learned through that process that you could impart on us?
I think the first one is listen to the operators, mission operators, because they're the ones who can use this. You know, acquisition, not against acquisition and, some of the PEOs or whatever believe that they have the intent of doing the right thing. However, if you don't bring in the operators that actually utilize it, like we brought in the operators for customer, that was a great experience because the programmers were going down one path and literally the operators were like, that's not what we want to see. That's not how we're going to ever use this. And so you always have to bring your users and use this, whatever you do. And I think that's what you have to do is use functional teams, whatever, when you're going to attack a problem now. And I think that's the main lesson we learned is how to do this better, as opposed to saying it's run by somebody over here who has no idea what the functional teams actually want to do.
So it's interesting, it really is bringing to reality what Marius was talking about with this paired programming strategy. You bring the mission right next to the technologies to drive that fused outcome, so to speak, that's always mission-centric and keeping that outcome.
Right, and they feed that to each other. So it's very interesting, dynamics that you get when you bring in the operators. Because they're like, well, I don't understand. They don't say anything. I don't understand what the screen actually tells me. And well, that's what the programmer liked it, but that was about it.
And that's such a great example of bringing to life, we hear the phrase, it's all about people, process, and technology. It's bringing those operators in that have a process, right? It's like, I have a process for how to do something, but if we're not designing the technology, it's not enabling people to do what the process is, making those change iteratively, and adaptively, then you don't get the transformation that you're looking for.
Right.
That's fantastic. Well, I need to get us back on track. So Michelle, what would be some of your final thoughts for people and recommendations on how to adopt emerging technologies safely and securely?
So I think it is looking across your entire stack, right? Figure out what the business problem is that you want to solve. Make sure that you've got an environment, right, that has access to your data, that is nimble and agile, that you can use, that can adopt and develop as you grow, like we learned in examples earlier.
Frank, words of wisdom for us.
Besides listen to the user, provide the correct tool set that actually gets the job done. Because that's what we found also, that if you don't have the correct tool set, and you have to understand tool sets evolve. So you have to be able to grab tools as needed, change them out, and have an environment where you can plug and play with the tool sets that you need to get your job done. Because a lot of times you can't be stuck with a tool that somebody liked a long time ago because everything changes, especially in cybersecurity. That's another issue that we always have, is that tool sets are dynamically changing. You've got to be able to adapt to that tool set. So even Castle One, we have a set of tools that we're talking always about changing the tools to be the advanced tool sets that are coming out now. So you've got to be able to adapt.
So it's interesting, it really underscores significantly from what you and Keith have talked about. The partnership with mission is becoming vital. It's no longer not just an essential or nice to have, it's vital to move the modern infrastructure forward for these types of disruptors. Keith, any parting thoughts for us? Because you've really come a long way with GSA, and it's really a testament to, in the civilian space, what we can be doing in the art of the possible. What are your parting thoughts for us?
High communication and collaboration across government and industry. We have to keep those doors open, transparent, and being able to move forward with technology and solutions. We definitely have to. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us in the IT modernization area, so the door is open with staff. I'm one person, but there's a whole team behind me that support me, so just that active collaboration.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Keith, Frank, and Michelle, thank you all so much.
Let's give them another round of applause. Our next panel is going to be talking about digital intelligence. We have quite quite the lineup. I mean, really a heavy hitter lineup. We have Scott Bean, who's the Assistant Director, IT Infrastructure Division at FBI. Mark Hoffman, who's the Deputy CIO at NSA. John Sherman, who's the CIO of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And our moderator is our very own friend, Steve Oren, who's the Federal CTO at Intel. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Good morning. There we go. So what I thought I'd kick off with is have each of the panelists just give a quick introduction to who they are, what they do, and what their current priority is, and then we'll dive into the topic for today. So Scott, let me kick off with you.
Sounds great. So my name is Scott Bean. I'm the Assistant Director for IT Infrastructure for the FBI. So I handle all the FBI's networks, data centers, and when I talk about the FBI's data centers, that also includes the Department of Justice, as we're consolidating data centers to two main CPFs. We're on the East Coast in Clarksburg and out in Pocatello for our West Coast. And then I also have our mobility solutions, so all of our cell phones, laptops, all of that. I will not be answering text questions today, just to be clear, although I get that quite a bit, actually. And then also I have a good piece of our cloud business in making those direct connections to our cloud service providers.
Good morning. My name is John Sherman. I'm the Intelligence Community Chief Information Officer. I sit in the Office of Director of National Intelligence, but my job is to work with all 17 intelligence agencies, to include MARC and others, and FBI, as we continue our modernization efforts, primarily marked by the intelligence community, information technology enterprise, or ISIDE as it's known, as it's been underway about 6 years. As we made our moves to the cloud, and now as we really start to unlock the power of our data and move to AI and ML capabilities and everything that involves. So that's my priority.
Good morning, I'm Mark Hoffman, as introduced. I am the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the National Security Agency. And that would be a vulnerability with know as business IT, the systems that make the internal agency run, and all the mission systems under John's guidance and making the intelligence community as a whole work together as a well-oiled machine for data and analytics and just the overall intelligence mission.
Thank you. So let's deconstruct the title of our panel here. So it says the Digital Intelligence Panel. What does that really mean? And the way I look at it, I want to make it simple. Do more with data. And so when we think about that challenge of how do we do more with data, I want each of you to sort of give your thoughts on how does your individual agency, or John, in your case, how are you guiding 17 agencies to really transform, to meet the needs of the dealings of data, the fire hose that we were talking about, zettabytes of data, and really start to take advantage of these new emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, and deep learning to really help get the intelligence out of the data and to be ahead of that curve. So John, why don't you kick us off a little bit?
Thank you very much, Steve. Well, as mentioned, we've been underway for about 5 to 6 years with ISIDE and the cloud capabilities we have with the IC GovCloud of the National Security Agency and what we call commercial cloud services, which CIA currently runs, and Amazon Web Services is our provider for that. That's been a great foundation. I'm blessed by having the predecessors to put that in place, but now we need to take it to the next step. Now, for a long time, we've been talking about data being an intelligence community asset, or tag the person and tag the data. Now, while we've made a lot of progress in those areas, particularly within the individual agencies, we still have a ways to go at the IC level. Doing some basics like cataloging all the many data sets we have. Doing entitlement access. There's still too many person-to-person access issues where you have to know the right individual and the right agency to get to the right data set. To me, this is really existential as to why my job exists and why the Office of Director of National Intelligence exists. And we're not, if I have anything to say about it, we're not going to have another 9/11 because there was a data set in some agency that a well-meaning analyst or collector had that could have been that missing piece of a puzzle. But there's a lot of pick and shovel work we have to do across the interagency to making, for example, the different identity credential access management or ICAM solutions work together in a seamless fashion, ensuring we have the data standards across the different agencies, mindful of the different classifications and security requirements of each agency. And perhaps very importantly, working across different security fabrics. We've been heavily focused on the top secret side as part of ISIDE, But my former job was deputy of the CIA's open source enterprise. And I know full well that more and more of the data we need for our intelligence community mission may very well either not be classified, be publicly available, or be at the secret level. And we have to be able to work across all that. And all of these foundational efforts are leading to enabling AI machine learning, which we're already doing in the cloud, but we have to do this foundational work and leading the 17 agencies together to make this reality.
So Mark, as one of those 17 agencies, how are you executing on that vision, and how is the NSA moving forward to meet the needs of this data-driven future?
I would say it's interesting that the public traffic allowed me to actually come down here now instead of 2 hours. So I'm listening to Marius, his remarks, and Frank, the last panel. I'm thinking he's looking, I'm throwing you my talking points. Because a lot of that is the mission, in our case, mission is the data, and making sure that data that all the analysts have access to now on the IC GovCloud, as opposed to the stovepipes where they had before, that they can analyze across the data sets. And obviously, with the amount of data, doing more with more data, the analysts can't go physically look at that. So you need the artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to look across those data sets, look at the analytics, at the information that, in this case, your consumer, the warfighter, wants to glean from that. Use that analytics, come up with a solution set, and then change on the fly, because look at the secondary effects of that. Just because you're looking at analytic A one day doesn't mean analytic A works the next day, so that you have to analyze and use the analytics on top of that. So it's a perpetual, ever-changing, ever-increasing set of data that continually look at. And I'll also throw in one Josh Purdy's over as the cybersecurity mission as well. Look, we all do what we do on networks with the fundamentals. One of those is audit logs. Well, we cannot look at everything we audit, so machine learning is, again, a great enabler. We always look at what's actually happening on our networks, understand what's happening on our networks, and fight the battle on our health networks using AI, machine learning, and those technologies are available to us.
So Scott, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned some unique challenges for doing that transformation based on your mission space of having those dual roles. Can you talk a little bit about the unique environment that you live in when it comes to data transformation, the digital age with AI machine learning?
Happy to do that. So as John mentioned, we all lived through 9/11, and we all lived through the criticism that we got after 9/11 about not connecting dots. Well, if you think about what our collections looked like in 2001 to where we are today, we are orders of magnitude collecting more data across the entirety of our mission space than ever before. And we're still applying many of the same tools and techniques that we used and developed prior to and immediately following 9/11. And those tools and techniques are just not getting us where we need to be. So we recognize that we have all these data streams coming into us. We need to make sure that we are following the standards and how we're tagging, marking this data. And also, for the FBI, we have the unique position of straddling the intelligence community and law enforcement. So we have to be very careful in how we look at these data sets, that we're not inadvertently deeming a collection that we take in under one set of authorities with mission in another set of authorities, but still connecting every one of those dots that we can. So it's very unique for us. And then the other thing that plays into is when we're talking about AI and machine learning, tools and techniques that the people in the United States would be very comfortable with us using in the counterterrorism mission or the counterintelligence mission may cause intense discomfort if used in the criminal mission. So we have to be very thoughtful in how we're deploying those tools and techniques. I really look at AI and machine learning similar to the hiring process. If I'm looking at a tool, if I'm looking at an individual as a future employee or an algorithm, I'm kind of making the same calculus. Is this going to add to the mission? And am I going to be explained why this is the right person in the right place at the right time? Same thing for algorithms. I'm looking for the same thing, because once we get into that criminal case where we're up on the stand, I can't put the algorithm on the stand to explain how we knew to look at this person or this transaction or whatever. But it is critical to figure out how to use those tools and techniques to our benefit in a way that protects civil liberties and protects the rights of our citizens. The other thing that I would highlight that we mentioned just briefly here is the value that AI and machine learning is going to have in terms of our insider threat and user monitoring. Really understanding what our users do day in and day out to get that baseline of what normal activity for each individual user is, and then find those anomalies so we can drive our folks to really identify threats, whether they're cybersecurity threats or insider threats, more directly and deal with them quickly.
So we painted a pretty rosy picture that, you know, we're all going to be able to meet the needs and apply AI and make everything a better for our intelligence community and law enforcement as well. Well, let's talk a minute about what are some of the challenges we still face from a government perspective, whether it be from the infrastructure, the systems, the organizational challenges, and what can industry do to help you to both meet and exceed your expectations in trying to tackle those roadblocks. So Mark, let me start at the end with you. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that you're facing and also talk about where industry can come in and help, or at least smooth the edges around trying to adopt those challenges.
So as we're looking at new data sets, new data analytics, developers want to get after that and create those new data analytics. But not forget the old data still exists. So as you're looking to upgrade and making sure we're still backward compatible to a certain extent, because it's not a big bang. You don't upgrade all at once and forget about what you have on the other. So allow transitions to technologies to incrementally or manage that transition so the users can all come along in a smooth fashion and not feel disadvantaged, but not get shut off of what they could do before. Don't make it worse as you're doing that transition, because sometimes you do need to shut things off, but making sure they still have capabilities to transition to, that they're still able to go fulfill the mission. And as everybody said before, it's about the mission. So as long as the mission is advanced and the technology as the transition allows us to advance to do that, make sure those systems still have that capability forward as you transition on.
Okay, for us, from my position as the IC CIO, I really feel that I'm a coalition leader working with Mark, the Bureau, and many others here. So one challenge we have is making sure that we don't get locked into a specific one-size-fits-all type of solution. We've had some lessons learned on that early on in eyesight. Ensuring that we don't just make it Wild West where everybody does whatever they want, but also having the flexibility on the pendulum to where agencies like NSA and FBI can fit solutions to their unique mission, security, and baseline requirements. So on that as well, open architectures are imperative here. I often think about if I was sitting over the Department of Defense overseeing weapon systems, perhaps made by different vendors and manufacturers, they have to be able to talk together on the battlefield, whether it's an aircraft, a missile system, or a ground system. We have the same challenge within the IT and cyber domains, that we can't be locked into proprietary specific solutions that won't work across a baseline. So help me with that, help us with that. And finally, innovation. We've got some very innovative people across all 17 intel agencies, but you all in the private sector are right at the cutting edge of things. Continue to engage with us, continue to show us where we should be looking. We're so excited about, we've talked about AI and ML today. I know we've talked about quantum and other venues. This is going to change. I come from the mission side of the house. This is going to change the way analysts and collectors and others ask questions. Back in the day when I was looking at a light table over at the Washington Navy Yard as a satellite imagery analyst, we had a very kind of confined way we did business for the 80s and 90s, and now we've moved into a completely different paradigm. Help us to see the possibilities within the parameters of what I just talked about in terms of being able to work across this very large intelligence agency with tens of thousands of users with unique requirements that we all have to make it fit.
All right, I get back cleanup, I guess. So for me, it's really three things. It's that are challenges right now in how we're trying to execute our business: acquisition, security, and workforce. So in terms of acquisition, we're not nimble enough. We can't move fast enough. The processes that we have to go through in order to acquire technologies, even for testing and evaluation, are way too lengthy. We have to find a way to work with our partners across the entirety of government to make acquisitions in IT more palatable. For you as vendors and for us as consumers, we have to make that more palatable. In terms of security, we're all fighting through the same thing of getting to ATO. How do we get to ATO? And really it is about building fabrics and secure code repositories where all those controls have already been accounted for. We can inherit those controls and drive faster to ATO. So that's something I think all of us collectively are working on. And then finally, workforce. The vast majority of my workforce in IT infrastructure is very senior. It's a lot of GS-14s, GS-15s that have been with us for 20 plus years. Some of them are really sharp and have stayed on top of their skills. Some of them are going to have to completely reskill. And some of them are going to need to retire so I can bring in new people that actually have modern skills. And you know, we don't want to be ruthless about that, but we want to be real about that, because as I shut down a mainframe, I don't need a mainframe team anymore. But I certainly need people that understand user requirements, that can help drive what we're doing in cloud, what we're doing in applications development. And we want to make sure that we're partnering with you in industry to understand what training, what tools, what techniques can we take our more experienced workforce to reskill them, to keep them productive in the new environment.
So I want to hit on one last point to sort of end us off. And it was mentioned earlier that Dell was looking out to 2030 to sort of see what the future will be. And John, you also mentioned sort of the things that are exciting you. And so if I could get each of you just to leave the audience with, what is the one technology trend in digital intelligence that's really got you excited about the future? And so Scott, we'll kick off with you and go to Mark, and then John, you get to that cleanup.
That's great, thank you. So for us, it's mobility. Making our agents and analysts capable to gather the intelligence they need, where they need to gather it, to get that into our system of records rapidly without requiring them to come back to the office, and to deliver them the intelligence they need to be effective in the field. So really, for us, a lot of this is about making our workforce more mobile and more capable in the field.
I'll mention something that was mentioned earlier was the Internet of Things. As an intelligence platform, intelligence gathering, it presents both great opportunity, but great security risk. So that is something, we can't avoid, we have to go confront that, but it is something that from a new perspective, we're going to have to go think about and add to our quivers to deal with these new sensors, both from a collection standpoint and from a security standpoint. It's present challenges in both areas.
If you can pick one, maybe two things that really got you excited about the future.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, and just to rip off what I was talking about earlier, in terms of the explosion of publicly available information that can greatly enhance our intelligence, law enforcement, and other national security missions, and how integrating with our other classification layers and bringing AI and ML and all these other different capabilities to bear against that. There's both a challenge and an incredible opportunity. And if I can just say one other thing, I am inspired not only by what the future holds, but by our experiences that came before us. We talked about 9/11. I don't know if you all know this, today is the 25th anniversary of the Black Hawk Down incident in Mogadishu, Somalia, October 3rd, 1993. I was on active duty at Fort Stewart at the time. The reason I mention this is we studied a lot about that battle in the Army, and understanding that we could have known a lot more. I wasn't there, but I know people who were. We could have known a lot more about the battle space on the ground, about the culture of the Hamadana tribe in Mogadishu and Bakara Market, and so on. And I'm inspired by that to make sure that with this explosion of data and things that are not that highly classified, making sure our warfighters, intelligence officers, and other operators have the insights they need to have. So I'm both inspired by what came before us and excited about what we can apply to make sure we're successful in the future.
Thank you. And I want to thank my panel, and everyone thank Mark, Scott, and John.
So really honored to have Chief Robinson up here. For those of you that do not know, a Chief Warrant Officer 5 is like finding a four-leaf clover. There's literally, it's about 0.1% of the total uniformed Army. So real honored to have him up here, and hopefully we'll glean some unique insights into how the Army is tackling some of these really interesting challenges. So with that, When you start looking out at the kind of the bleeding edge, what is the Army's plan for adopting emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, advanced analytics?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to share some of my insights with you. So as it relates to artificial intelligence and machine learning, so the character and the nature of warfare is evolving and changing. And we're going to need to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and advanced analytics to actually tackle and win on the battlefield against your adversaries. So the character, now that the character of warfare is changing, we're looking at using machine learning, AI, and analytics to be able to build databases and data pools in order for our officers and our commanders out in the field to be able to access that information with actionable intelligence.
That's great. Now, I understand that we've set up a new one-star to actually lead some of the AI initiatives within the Army.
Yes, we're very happy and honored to have Brigadier General Easley to be the AI task force lead for the Army. We just recently signed him about 3 or 4 weeks ago on the ground here at the Pentagon, getting integrated. And I'm sure that he'll be working with industry pretty soon, so building relationships and developing our strategy as we move forward.
Fantastic. So now when you start to look out at the digital transformation plan within the Army, what does cloud adoption, what role does that play, and in what form?
So it's interesting because cloud is a buzzword. It's a regular statement. A lot of people, from a technology perspective, we all know what it means. But in the Army, we also have to figure out what does it mean for us from a technology perspective, and what does it mean for us in operations and in operations. So whether it be platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, or software as a service. What's going to be important is that from an Army perspective is that we look at how we want to use that. And we're looking at a hybrid solution. When we talk about a hybrid cloud solution, whether that be commercial or commercial operation. The most important thing about new cloud technology, whatever we talk about, is to make sure that we don't integrate the tactical and the strategic cloud together in order to build a capability to enable both the strategic leader and the actual operational commander on the ground to enforce a decision cycle and shorten the decision cycle for operations.
So, on that note, how do you then have that decision criteria flow down? Do you start at the tactical edge and build backwards, or are you starting at the enterprise and building forward?
So that's a really good question. So as we're developing today's operational TOPS, CPs, so we have something called Home Station Mission Command. A little bit, my predecessor, Jimmy, was one of the guys that really started this effort. So from a Home Station Mission Command perspective, before, if anybody's been in the Army, remember that the division headquarters, the division main, right? So the division main used to be a big tent in the middle of the desert to be able to do operations, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've done is we've taken that big tent technology, put it in the heart of the building inside of a post-camper station, but it's actually the D-main actually operating inside of the commission. So with that being said, a commander now has actionable information, so as he moves units into a fight, he doesn't have to move his command post in order to do it. He always has all the information resident to him right there.
So they're training on the same technology that they'll be using in the field.
Correct.
Fantastic. So when you look out, what do you consider to be the Army's greatest digital transformation achievement over the last year?
So I believe our biggest achievement is our network modernization effort that we're doing right now. It's the largest network modernization effort able to do over the last over the past 2 years. So in the Army of the past, we always had a network-centric environment. So we wanted to make sure that we had connectivity. If we had those things, then the commander decision-making cycle will be shorter and he would be able to make decisions. That's still important, but now we have more of a data-centric environment. What information does he require and when does he require it? How do we get the data to him in a usable format so that they're not giving him information overload, but we're also providing him the resident information in order to make timely and accurate decisions all the way at the edge and all the way, if we're talking about the tank inside of the Pentagon, wherever that happens to be. One of the things that we're going to have to do with that is that's where AI, machine learning, and all of those things come into play, because we're going to need a mechanism to be able to shift all of that information into a usable format for the leader to make choices.
That's great. Well, tackling such large problems for a massive enterprise, what recommendations would you have for other agencies as they start to take on some of these same challenges?
Well, some of the recommendations I would have is in the Army, we have, whenever we're working with trying to leverage new technology, we have an inherent risk because sometimes the technology that we roll out, if we do it incorrectly, has life or death implications. So what we try to do is we try to leverage industry, and as they learn and modify those systems that you guys use out in the field or out in industry, we take those lessons learned and we try to incorporate those so that we're able to shorten our gap of our resources. Number one, our finite amount of resources, and number two, the amount of time we need, the speed to providing technology at the edge.
So really partnering with industry to bring some of those capabilities in-house as quickly as possible, and letting industry fail a little bit more than you so that you can learn from those key insights. Well, really appreciate your time. Thank you for your service, as well as taking the time to sit up here with us and sharing all your insights, and we're really looking forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's give them another round of applause. So I'm excited to introduce our next panel. We have a cloud panel and quite the lineup there. We have Rear Admiral Ron Hewitt, who's the Director of Office Emergency Communications at the Department of DHS. Pamela Issam, who's the Deputy CIO for Architecture, Engineering, Tech, and Innovation, just a few things, and the Chief Data Officer at Department of Energy. Paul Puckett, who's the CTO of Pivotal Federal. Colonel Bobby Saxon, who's the CTO at CMS. And our moderator is our very own Editor-in-Chief for FedScoop, Billy Mitchell. Please join me in welcoming them all.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have you all out here to talk a little bit about what's been probably the most burning and hot topic in federal IT over probably the past decade. But it comes at a very timely time, as we've heard this morning from our own federal CIO, Suzette Kent, as they introduced the new Cloud Smart policy. If you haven't heard about it, please visit fedscoop.com to read about it. Shameless plug right there. But we have only like 20 minutes to talk about this, a bunch of great panelists on stage. I want to go through, obviously we have Rear Admiral Ron Hewitt from DHS, Pam Isom of Department of Energy, Paul Puckett of Pivotal, and Colonel Bobby Saxon of CMS. But lots to talk about, lots to unload on cloud, so let's jump right into it. We've heard a lot about the large modernization strides that the federal government wants to make, and obviously cloud is a major part of that, and how we can make strides to modernize and upgrade decades-old IT systems. So let's start with you, Bobby. How is cloud playing a big part of that modernization scheme, and how are you seeing it at CMS?
Well, at healthcare.gov, which is specifically where I am inside of CMS, it's playing a huge role for us. We have been about 15-20% in the cloud for really since almost the beginning of our implementations. However, we've never really taken a bold step to get in the cloud. And last fall, late fall, we made the decision we're going to go all in on the cloud, and we are about halfway through a move for our entire, all of our systems, all of our infrastructure into the cloud. We think it's going to play a huge role for us because one of the challenges that we have is that we have a 45-day open enrollment period, starts November 1st through December 15th, where we have a surge of people come to our website. And what that does is it forces us and our current infrastructure to always be ready for that because we don't have the ability to size up, to resize up and down. And with the cloud, we hope that that will allow us really to handle those half a dozen days a year where we're looking at 2 million or so people coming into healthcare.gov. There is some legacy technology, even though we're a young organization, still some legacy technology that we're wanting to move away from. We believe being in the cloud is going to help us to more quickly adopt and embrace new innovative technologies.
Let's jump, Paul, get to Pam and Ron, and then we'll come back to you because you're on the private side. We'll get your perspective after that. But Pam, how about we hear about what you're doing at Energy?
So at the Department of Energy, we're leveraging cloud for lots of different things, but you know, the typical email services and some of the shared services, we're using cloud for that. I would say that one of the things that we're leveraging cloud for is to really optimize and drive efficiencies in data centers. So we have data centers that we just need, we need the performance, the cloud performance. The service providers really provide good capabilities that we really cannot provide ourselves trying to host the data centers on premise. So we're starting to see data centers reduction, and the amount of workloads that are in our data centers it's declining, and we're just getting better performance of the workloads in the cloud environments.
And then Ron.
Yeah, our office supports public safety around the country. There's over 6,100 public safety answering points. There are 911 centers that are right now migrating to next generation 911, which will change their pretty much voice-only networks into multimedia. And so cloud's going to be huge in helping them be successful in terms of computer-aided dispatch to computer-aided dispatch and all the other systems they have to be interoperable between all the public safety entities doing that. And so we've adopted more of that cloud smart. When you look at cloud first, what the federal government went through, that was pretty much buy over build, right? Whereas cloud smart's saying, hey, before you buy, make sure you know your requirements. And so we're working with them to make sure they know their requirements and drive a successful implementation.
And Paul, you're with Pivotal, and you look from a different perspective in the private sector and see a lot of things that agencies are doing. So in this push towards modernization, how are you guys viewing the cloud?
A lot of our customers come to us because we've service-enabled compute and storage on demand. It doesn't make it easy, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the customers are actually getting their problems solved, right? And so what we help with is the actual transition to cloud, understanding that the cloud is really, it's an arrow in the quiver, not the entire quiver. And so how you use it strategically, both from a business value as well as a vision outcomes perspective, simply needs to be taken into context. And that said, how quickly you can create a hypothesis and test it, validate it, or invalidate it, and measure and move forward in a meaningful way is what we try and help our customers do. And so essentially cloud just simply becomes an option, and it really becomes customer focused on the problem, and then hopefully getting to a solution, not just necessarily moving to cloud because it's a fun buzzword, right? And people that aren't taking their customer to an account and learning are the ones that are seeing the challenges with enterprise scale as well as cost.
Great. And I think what you just said kind of sums up what cloud smart seems to be. And it's that cloud isn't just a buzzword or something you should move to for the sake of it. It's not a shiny object that every agency might need for every solution. It's all about mission, it seems like. Ron, you mentioned it a little bit, in that transition from cloud first to cloud smart. What really is that difference? And if you can elaborate a little bit more what you're talking about on why some decisions make sense for the cloud and some don't.
Again, cloud first was geared more towards buy versus build, right? And so it was geared more towards who owned the infrastructure, right? Is it the government or is it the vendor and stuff? Whereas Cloud Smart's saying, hey, let's not worry about that. Let's worry more about the mission and identify what do we really need to have a successful implementation of technology to support the business needs. So it's identifying, more, solve, identify what you need to do, and then identify what best. And that's going to be based on privacy, security, reliability, availability, all those things you now have to look. I mean, I've seen so many email transitions that weren't successful because they didn't take into account storage, privacy, records management, all those aspects. So it just helps you better Cloud Smart to have your requirements up front and then work with the vendor and stuff to make sure that your implementation is going to be successful.
I think Cloud Smart really encourages also strategic thinking. So when you're starting to look at and consider a cloud environment, it encourages you to look at the service providers, look at your business needs, understand what it is that you really need and why cloud would be the best fit. But I really embrace the idea of the Cloud Smart because of the encouragement of strategic thinking, strategic planning, really in looking at the service level agreements, the service level requirements that you would be expecting from your cloud service providers. And then if that's not the right fit, explore another cloud provider. If that's not the right fit, keep it at home, right? Do something different. I think that that's what I really like the most. And I also felt in studying the initiative around Cloud Smart is that it was also encouraging more of a federal approach and less of a siloed approach. And I really, really like that because there are so many advantages to something when you're looking at it from a strategic perspective and from an enterprise perspective and working with those cloud service providers. I'm expecting to take advantage of volume discounts as well as other, there's the whole acquisitions and common approaches for the acquisition instead of having to reinvent the wheel. So I think it's a very good thing.
Paul, what are you seeing from your side? I think we talked a little bit about prioritization and total business case. How are you guys viewing the Cloud Smart from the private sector?
Well, so obviously Cloud Smart in the sense of lift and shift, or some people are now calling it migration. Like, oh, I'm not lifting and shifting, I'm migrating. It's the same thing. So transitioning away from that, people are starting to get a little bit smarter as to how they leverage different, I would articulate it as differentiating services. There are various services from various cloud providers that kind of differentiate them in the market. And so how you leverage those capabilities matters. And what we're seeing is there's almost kind of an anti-corruption layer that needs to exist in your ability to move seamlessly between clouds. It's the movement towards hybrid, right? And so it gets to what language are we speaking in a common way across these various clouds? Because if we're speaking at the infrastructure layer for each one of these services, we're speaking specific APIs written a specific way by a specific cloud provider. And if it turns out to not be the thing you want to use, you're rewriting to move between these various clouds. And so customers that are coming to Pivotal are also looking for that anti-corruption layer, right? That abstraction layer between various clouds to move seamlessly between them to derive the value that they need from each one when it comes to their customer needs, right? And their business cases that they're working with.
And then Bobby, what can you say that they haven't already?
Well, I welcome Cloud Smart, but not so much because it brings a bunch of new innovative ideas as much as it codifies what I think most of us have already been doing for some time. When Cloud first came out, there was a lack of early adoption or a willingness to go into the cloud because most of what is now documented in Cloud Smart is what we all had to kind of figure out. So we've taken a Cloud Smart approach without knowing we had a new name for it yet. But what we did was we put out 4 mandates, and really 3 that were really critical. One was that it would be cloud first, cloud ready, and cloud agnostic, because if we weren't going to build it into the cloud because we weren't quite prepared to get there, we wanted to build it so it was prepared for the cloud, so we wouldn't be doing a lift and shift, so we'd be able to eventually move a fully optimized piece of software over into the cloud. And quite frankly, although we are moving to Amazon because that's how our contracting works out, there's no belief in my part that we will stay at Amazon, because ultimately I want to go where I can get cheaper, faster, better cloud and it's just cloud agnostic to me. It's really not the vendor I'm chasing so much as it is the capability I'm looking for. In our organization, we did not want to do a lift and shift, and so we actually came up with a new phrase, which we call LISO, and it's lift, improve, shift, and then optimize. So when we pick it up, can we improve it and take advantage of some cloud capabilities when we sit it back down in the cloud? So from a security point of view, from a resizing point of view, from an automation point of view, and we're taking that approach. And we are on track, we're doing the right things, but we still have 7 or 8 months to get to that point where we'll know for sure that our approach is the right approach.
Great. And I think one of the good things about this latest policy is they break it down, and it's not all about the technology. It's a lot about the security, the workforce, the acquisition, and things that are all just as critical as, actually, having the technology be operational. So I'd like to pivot and talk a little bit about those things. And obviously, culture is a big part of it. If people aren't buying into it, they're not going to use it, and it's not going to be successful. So we could just run back down the line, and what other parts of this equation do we need to be focused on? Is it acquisition? Is it the culture, the workforce, the security? And how does that play in? What can you offer other CIOs and IT executives around the federal government?
Well, the piece that I'll tackle here is the culture piece. I think most of the IT folks in this room, it's really not a big culture thing to think about going to the cloud. But for my business owners who we are supporting their mission, it was surprisingly a big culture change for them. So we have learned through this process to be very open and with our communications, work in a very collaborative way, and brief our business owners on what we are accomplishing, even though there's really just more for their awareness than it is for their actual action. Because I was surprised that I got a lot of questions of, well, what is the cloud? And if you're in the government IT or if you're in civilian IT, you've been hearing that term for half a dozen years or longer out there. But for your average business owner, that was not the case. So we have what we call the CTO Cloud Roadshow every month. It's come one, come all. No question is off the table. We will give them a full update on what we've accomplished since the last time that we had this meeting. And then we answer some very complicated questions that are very specific to a business owner to some very general questions that are extremely simple. But it puts really our partners at ease, which is helping us overcome the cultural change.
Paul, what are you guys seeing?
So the security piece is a passion project of ours. A lot of people don't know this. It was mentioned a little bit earlier about the Tinker Planner Toolkit. And it was actually NGA that accredited and hosted that capability when it first went live. And it also pokes to the portability as well as inheritance model, right? And so they're all security relevant. A lot of people don't know Tinker Planner Toolkit was built on a laptop, accredited on the low side at NGA in commercial AWS, and run in production on-premise in vSphere. And so that portability between each one of those environments, one, the code base never changed, and two, the inheritable controls never changed. And it got to the abstraction layer from a cloud-native platform. And so it kind of gets to the security discussion that's moving forward and recommendations, is as you're doing your improvement and optimization is building towards what we'd articulate as the 12 factors of cloud-native software development. And that gets into ML and AI. You've got to be great at software if you're going to solve the ML and AI problem. And so those 12 factors of cloud-native software development, that is your portable open language. That's the language we all should be speaking when we talk about hybrid cloud. And that inheritance model of immutability of an environment all the way up to the namespace, not just the infrastructure. That's what's going to allow us to standardize and share mission capabilities across all agencies.
Pam or Ron, any additional?
I can talk to that a little bit. I find that at the Department of Energy that my business partners and end customers really care about the security associated with the cloud solutions. So if they have applications and we inform them that we are looking to move these applications to a cloud environment, we have to take the time to explain to them what that means. And hopefully it is seamless and really doesn't have any impacts to them. But typically that's not the case, right? They have to get the applications ready. They have to work with us to get the applications ready for deployment to the cloud environments. But the biggest fear that I experience is, what does that mean for me? How's that going to impact me and my mission? And how are we going to be sure that that my applications are protected, right? And there are no security vulnerabilities. So I think from a cultural perspective, you just have to educate folks and help them to understand that sometimes the cloud environment is even more secure than your on-premise environments. And again, as I mentioned before, we are a multi-cloud environment. We don't believe in just one. So we shop around for the best environment for our business stakeholders.
Ron, do you have anything to add?
Well, to answer your question, it's all the above, right? You got to address them all when you're going to migration. One of the unintended consequences we're seeing from public safety moving to the cloud is data interoperability. It's been a huge success because in the past you had 86,000 law enforcement agencies and fire departments and stuff, all using kind of their own proprietary designs, and by moving to the cloud, they're using national information exchange models and other standards for data interoperability, and that's been a huge success in terms of having them all work together at an incident. The other aspect that we're seeing the cloud drive is the security of the applications. We're looking now, in the past it was pretty much trusted internet connection, right? You build a big firewall, DMZ, and you have intrusion detection prevention. Now we're actually seeing the encryption of the data in transit at rest on your mobile device, because everybody wants mobile capabilities, right? So you have to look at it totally different than just isolating your network. You have to have it so that you can actually have security at the data layer, and that's actually being driven by most of this cloud innovation, and it's greatly appreciated.
Great. Well, we're running out of time. I'll open it up to the four of you. We've heard a lot about Cloud Smart, and we kind of get a gist of where we are today, but do you have any final thoughts on what's next? Maybe is there something more you'd like to have seen, or any and all of the above, just to wrap up this conversation here today?
Start. I'm looking to take the cloud environment and use it for building the data lakes and building an environment for our researchers, our scientists, to be able to conduct experiments and to really conduct better research. So I'm looking to augment the cloud environment for that type of capability, something that we aren't really able to do as effectively as we would like on-premise.
Anybody else? Closing thoughts?
If you haven't begun this journey, start it as soon as possible. Even 1 or 2 apps in the cloud will grow your knowledge exponentially, and it will build an appetite within your organization to be more in the cloud. We had, like I said earlier, a few applications in the cloud when we went all in on this, but it really energized my IT teams. Although I was a culture change issue with my business owners, my IT teams were like, finally, let's go and let's do this. And so we've been able to leverage some of the skills they had already developed, but we're teaching them along the way also. And there's a lot of goodness out there. And if you don't like, sometimes people get shamed over lift and shift, but get there and solve a problem and then figure out how to optimize later on. Don't think you have to optimize to get into the cloud. We have a performance and stability issue during the hottest 5 days of the year for us, and the cloud is going to help us address those issues immediately, even if we simply did a lift and shift. So anyway, get started.
Paul?
A few thoughts. I was actually on an AWS panel like 2 years ago, and they asked, like, what conversations do you hope we're having in a couple of years? And I said, I hope we're not arguing as to whether or not we should leverage a cloud architecture. So I think we're past that, which is a great thing. But now it's understanding how to use it effectively. I agree with your point. Start small. If we all agree that culture is an issue here, right? Expecting your entire enterprise to adopt culturally, let alone the technical challenges that exist, it's not going to be successful, right? And so create a place for a small team with a very distinct problem that the customers cannot take anymore, and solve that thing and improve out the model, and you'll change the culture as a byproduct of that.
And then Ron, you want to put a bow on it?
Again, just make sure that you get your the operators together and have a good team on identifying what your requirements are before you go and actually get it. And then look at this as actually a partnership with whoever is going to provide that service, because there's always things that you're going to want to do differently and stuff, and to be able to have that change and capability. At the same time, ensure your workforce is willing to change, because generally you're implementing best in practices, which aren't always being done in your agency to begin with. So it does require change, and you got to have that whole piece of training and making sure that you work the workforce through the evolution of adapting to the new processes.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them another round of applause. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Okay, let's give them another round of applause. Thank you. Okay, I'm excited about our next panel because this topic is a topic that seems to come up a lot in conversations that we have in the community, and that's the workforce. So, and specifically the next gen cyber workforce. So our next panel has quite a few experts on this topic, and I'm excited to introduce them. We're going to have Dee Dee Halvorsen, who's the Senior VP and Solutions Lead at Booz Allen Hamilton, Basil Parker, Senior Advisor for Government-Wide IT and Cyber Workforce Development at OPM, Danielle Santos, who's the Program Manager of the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education at NIST, Colonel Chris Wade, who's the Director of Task Force Cyber Strong at U.S. Army, and our moderator, who's our very own Kelly Furr, who's the Vice President of Federal Channels and Alliances at Dell EMC. Please give them a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Goldie. As you heard already, we are here to talk about cyber workforce transformation. So inside the topic, the grand topic of digital transformation, we look at workforce transformation, but we hear that this is Cybersecurity Month. So I'm very honored to have the opportunity to host this panel discussion on building a cybersecurity workforce, or our cyber workforce. And each of the four panelists in front of me have distinguished themselves in this topic in their careers. So I wanted to give each person, each panelist, an opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves and about that background in cybersecurity and shaping this as an industry for all of us. So let's start with Dee Dee.
Sure. Hi, my name is Dee Dee Helfenstein. I'm a Senior Vice President with Booz Allen Hamilton, and I'm our Solutions Officer for the firm. So I'm responsible for developing digital, cyber, and immersive solutions for the firm. And obviously, you know, with the 0% availability of cyber professionals in the nationwide, this is a big challenge for us as a firm, both from a capability perspective of our labor-based business, but also from a solutions perspective. So something I'm very excited to be on the panel today.
Thank you. All right, and Basil, you're next.
Hi, good afternoon. Basil Parker, Senior Advisor for the Director of OPM for Government-Wide IT and Cyber Security Workforce Development. So try and put that on a business card. I'm primarily responsible for working across government, working on several working groups and committees to help the government figure out ways to really drive hiring, recruiting, hiring, and retaining cybersecurity talent and IT within the federal workforce.
And hi, I'm Danielle Santos, the Program Manager at the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. And to go along with Basil's comment about a business card, NICE, as we call it, is managed by an office in NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, which is under the Department of Commerce, so that also makes for a long title. We at NICE are really focused on energizing and promoting cybersecurity workforce, not only education, but also training, workforce development, really that pipeline of how can we get more people into cybersecurity careers with the skills needed to be ready to go on the job and be a successful contributor to an organization.
Colonel Wade.
Hey, I'm Chris Wade. I work for the G357 and
Department of the Army. Some of the big projects we're looking at, of course, is how do we take our soldiers, train them to look across the Army for that mission assurance, mission readiness, looking across at the cyberspace operations, whether it be from the defensive cyber side, our offensive cyber side. And I can't talk about that without also thinking about my signal counterpart that was up here from the CIO G6, about the guys that run, operate, build, maintain those networks, as well as our intel side. So it's really a team approach when we start talking about the cyber workforce and the cyber mission workforce.
Absolutely. It is a team approach. But as a job role, cybersecurity is pretty new, right? We've all been around for a while, not all of us, but a lot of us have been around for a while, talking about technology and innovation. And as you look at the technology curve going up and to the right, that's where we all want to be. But our cyber workforce curve also needs to be going up and to the right. And we know the more things we put on the wire, the more potential vulnerabilities we expose. So building this cyber workforce is not without its challenges. And that's one of the things that I want to dive into today is really talking about, and we'll start with you, Basil, the policies, from OPM, you're working actively to shape and to help us to attract the talent and programs that you're influencing. So can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that you're seeing from an attracting talent perspective?
Sure, I would say that it's a tie on the challenges that we're having between recruiting and retaining. We're having trouble with both. Let me give you some statistics just to highlight some of the challenges. It takes approximately 106 days to hire somebody into the federal government. Only 6% of the federal government is under the age of 30, and a quarter of the federal government is eligible to retire today, with that growing to 2/4 in a decade. This is the federal workforce, so not including the military. Those numbers would probably change. So there's a crisis looming for the federal workforce for cybersecurity professionals. So what is OPM doing about it? Well, one of the things we're doing is we're trying to relax the bureaucracy with that 106 days, so shrink that as much as we can. So breaking news, we'll be releasing later this month a regulation for direct hire authority to all government agencies for cybersecurity professionals. They'll be able to direct hire those folks according to the rules and regulations, which we will have in our regulation that will be released. We're also looking at more different and unique ways to bring folks into the government, limited term appointments, rotational assignments, public-private partnerships, things like that, which will enable, what we're really trying to do is make it easier for people to flow in and out of government. It's very difficult now. I think today's workforce, when you get hired to a company, you don't necessarily think you're going to work there for 20 years. You think you'll work there for 3 to 5, you'll gain some great experience, and then you'll move on to your next challenge. The way the workforce is structured today within the government doesn't really allow for that very easily. So we're looking at ways to relax that and make it easier. And then the last thing I'll say is we're also looking to recruit from within. So reskill, upskill, moving from low skill to high skill work through the Workforce Fund, which will be managed much like the Technology Management Fund is managed today.
Thank you. So Basil is in his department. They're going to help you all modernize on the hiring policies. I've already heard some of that earlier today. So I think that's fantastic. So where you and Danielle are kind of focused on attracting the talent, Colonel Wade has actually been busy hiring and building the talent. And when we look at a cyber workforce, one of the challenges is really that skills gap. And I know from having college-age kids in my house, the things that they're interested in, they want to have the technology. I have a senior in college, and actually this made me very happy 2 Sundays ago, so I'm going to tell you the quick story. And he's preparing his resume. He's a computer science kid. He's getting ready to go out into the workforce, and he calls with questions every once in a while. And his roommate has, the last 2 summers, done an internship with Google. Well, my son called 2 Sundays ago, and he said, "Hey, Mom, I'm thinking about this Army Futures thing. Can you tell me a little bit about it? So you do have some messages out there that are starting to resonate, but tell us a little bit about your experience, what you look for in hiring these young cybersecurity professionals, because unlike the IT professionals that we're used to recruiting and hiring, a cybersecurity professional is going to be a little different.
Yeah, so kind of a little bit different than Basil's comments about the age. Most of our workforce is between 18 to 26. And so as we look at those young people and who we're attracting into the force, is at this point, as we've stood up the cyber branch and we have the cyber operational specialty, bringing these young men and women to work in this area, we've not necessarily had a recruiting problem. It's a 6-year commitment for our young enlisted guys to come in, but what we're doing is that we're providing them some exquisite, in-depth training, not only technical training, but more about problem solving. If we were to just look at technology, we see that technology is rapidly moving, and so if we train them in a specific technology, within a year, 2 years, 3 years, that is already going to be outpaced and outdated. So we're really looking at how do we train them at being a problem solver in this mission area. As we look at it, it's not just the recruitment, it's the training, development, and it's not just for those first few years, it's looking at them for a career. As we look at it, we think about them in terms of, we know we're not going to keep everyone. We look at it about, we're going to keep about a third for that full-time career. And so that's about 2/3 of our workforce that we know that we're going to lose back to industry or to another government agency. And so we looked at that as a win, because not only are they continuing to help defend our nation, but when they transition either to the civilian workforce, they're going to go work for companies such as Dell and is represented in this audience, or across our federal government. And so we see that as a win, also continuing to help defend our nation.
Thank you. All right, so Dee Dee, from a little bit of a different perspective from the industry, kind of from our side of the table, I know that you are working with cybersecurity professionals in the government and have seen this firsthand. What are some of the perspectives that you'd like to discuss?
Thanks. So we actually just did a survey of over 200 federal IT executives across the federal government, and found a lot of interesting results, and it was all on cybersecurity as well as cybersecurity workforce. And much like some of the Dell surveys that have recently been done, where 82% of respondents will take a job based on the modern technology, 42% will leave a job based on that technology that's available. We found the same thing from federal IT executives, that 93% of them said that the modern technology is a critical component of what they're concerned about, and especially around mobility. And the mobility devices and giving mobility, the same mobility people have at home, they want at work. But there's challenges with that, and they also noted a number of challenges. The first being around the security of the mobile devices. The second around having the ability to enable security protocols based on location. So be that different buildings or different rooms inside a building. And the last was around device location and being able to track the devices. 75% of them said they don't have the ability to track the devices and shut them down at a firmware level right now. So based on what Basil said, with the aging workforce, we've got a workforce now that's demanding mobile security, but we've also got the next generation, which are really digitally native. And they are going to not only demand it, but expect it. And so the ability to not only give the current population within the federal government the modern technology, but also to attract the future generation is going to be critical.
Thank you. All right, so Danielle, the next question is for you. Dee Dee brought up the idea of using advanced technology to supplement the cybersecurity within our network. So what do you see from NICE? What are y'all thinking about in terms of automation and artificial intelligence and how that's going to interact with the cyber workforce that we're all hoping to build?
So I think as we think about our future workforce and how automation and artificial intelligence will play into that, I think we'll definitely see the types of jobs expand, as they already are. We've created a nice cybersecurity workforce framework, which right now has 5 categories of overarching work and 52 work roles. And I think that 52 number is going to increase exponentially as more devices are being connected, as more roles in the workplace use connected technologies and devices. We're going to need more and more people with cross-cutting skills, multidisciplinary backgrounds that they can pull from those skill sets and bring them into the cybersecurity space so that we can cover all of our bases when it comes to really securing those devices that are being connected.
All right, so believe it or not, it is almost time for final thoughts. So be prepared. I'm going to give you a little prompt here. I recently heard on a podcast talking about the relationship between technology and the cyber workforce, that it's like having brakes on a car. It enables you to go faster. In other words, you would never drive your car at 90 miles an hour if you didn't know you had a reliable set of brakes. So what are your thoughts, your final thoughts about the cyber workforce and the future that we are working to build here together? You are 3 years old now. I bet you've learned some lessons.
Okay, so we're the cyber branch with our guys in there. What's exciting about it is that those who are in there that we brought in at the first stages are just now starting to compete for those promotions. And so we're seeing them grow and move into those positions of greater leadership. As we look at the technology and people walking away from technology, and we're in an austere environment, we don't really take mobile devices where we work for the most part. But what's really exciting is as we see them continue to develop the return on investment, it's the anecdotal stories about the impact individuals are making towards mission. So a cyber protection team goes out and to respond to an incident. The innovation and their ability to think beyond just the normal Army, if X, then do this. They're coming up with innovative solutions. They're bringing in new technologies. We're giving them freedom to innovate. And I just get really excited when I hear the stories about individuals that I was part of assessing into the branch of succeeding in that return on investment. So I think the future is bright for our cybersecurity workforce, especially from our cyber operators, whether they be offensive or defensive operators. They're excited about their missions. And I think for the Cyber Corps and for our Army, we're going to continue to just make big gains in that area. And I'm excited about for you all is that you're going to benefit from these young men and women, whether it be at the end of their initial commitment at 6 years or further along in their career when they decide to transition back out. I think, again, like I said earlier, it's a win-win for all of us.
Great. All right. Anyone else? Dee Dee? We'll go Dee Dee and then Basil and finish with Danielle.
So I think 2 things that I wanted to say. The first is, as we said, with a 0% unemployment rate in cyber and an expectation that by 2021 we're going to have 3.5 million unfilled jobs, I think it is important to not only attract, but also to really train up cyber professionals. And so we've got a program called Cyber Corps, where we actually take people who are interested and have the aptitude for cyber and really give them the basic skill sets, because we can't expect to just hire them in. We're all competing for the same talent. We've really got to train them up. And so I think that's one. I think my second point is around that, to add to Basil's statistics earlier, that there is also a gender challenge that we have in cyber. Only 14% of the cyber professionals are women. When we look at college graduates, 57% of the college graduates are women, over 30% of the STEM graduates are women. We've got a challenge in cybersecurity, and we've got to address that challenge. All of us, it's an imperative.
I think I would just add to what Dee Dee said and kind of what I said before. There's a real crisis. I like to say that I think we need our Manhattan Project level of focus in this cyber industry. We need to bring academia, government, and the private sector together to really solve this problem. Sure, the federal government, we're behind on cybersecurity professionals, but so are you, so are the private sector. They're not there. I go out there and I talk to academia, and they're not even in the classrooms for some reason, even though a lot of universities have these programs. We need to do a better job at going to the high schools, maybe even elementary schools, and just talking about cyber as a career and in the federal government as a career choice.
That's great. And Danielle, could you talk a little bit just in closing about some of those programs that you're involved in?
Sure. So, well, I wanted to say that when it comes to planning for the workforce, I think there are two things that we need to think about. The immediate needs in the immediate workforce, as we know there are CyberSeek states that there are over 300,000 jobs right now, today, that are open in cybersecurity. So to fill that immediate need, we're thinking about how can we accelerate learning and skills development to really get people on board. And as Basil mentioned earlier at OPM, and they're not only focused on recruiting, but also reskilling. So I think that's one of the main ways that we can really focus on filling the immediate needs. Reskilling, apprenticeships, cooperative education programs, such as there are cybersecurity apprenticeships through the Department of Labor right now, and that's continuing to grow. There are things like the CyberCorps Scholarship for Service Program, which the NSF and DHS provide funding to students for, Centers of Academic Excellence. There's so many programs out there to help fill that. But then the second thing I think is long-term, our future workforce. How are we going to work with students at a young age to get them knowledgeable that cybersecurity is a viable career path and a career option? So how can we really raise awareness of these careers and then start looking at what kinds of classes and what kinds of extracurricular activities they can do, competitions, things like that, to start getting their feet wet, start building up some not only technical but soft skills as well, so that once they get into the workforce, I think some of those soft skills will help them be flexible and be able to take on new skills as needed with the changes in technology that we're bound to see as the workforce grows. So I think those are just some of the things we should be thinking at.
Great. Well, thank you. We are out of time, but I just want to say in closing, I appreciate everyone participating in the panel this morning and talking about it. Cybersecurity workforce is brand new, relatively speaking. You're not going to find somebody who's a 30-year professional in cyber. So I want to just encourage all of you, since it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, really that we should all take our cybersecurity training very seriously, and it is incumbent upon all of us to recognize risk and to know what actions we need to take. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Let's give them another round of applause. I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker. He's joined us a few times in the past and always has a lot of interesting things to talk about. He's going to be talking about modernizing government, progress, and opportunities. He's the Special Assistant to the President for Innovation Policy and Initiatives in the Executive Office of the President. Please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to my friend, Matt Lira.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. Just as someone who's been involved in the civic tech community for longer than I'd care to admit, anytime I have the opportunity to speak with you in this community, it's always a privilege. So thanks again for the time, and I hope the conference is and will continue to be a great success. So I'd like to begin, if we can, just by, if you will indulge me, just imagine a house in your mind. So your typical American suburban home. Now imagine that house is on fire. Now I'm sure there's a lot of problems with this house if it's like any typical American home. The banister is probably a little loose. Maybe there's some creaking floorboards. Maybe the deck needs resurfacing. But I think we can all agree, if this was our home, our number one priority would be putting out the fire. And so as we think about federal technology and federal services and the federal technology ecosystem writ large, there's no shortage of challenges. I think all of us can validate that. I think the challenge for all of us, though, is figuring out which represents the fire. What are those ultimate priorities that we need to do first that have the most impact? As I look back at the last 15 years of progress, you can see a lot of notable wins, and I think, as I've said many times, we want to build on those wins and hopefully lay the foundation for future success long into the future. But one of the challenges that we're still confronting today is the pace of change in the government has largely been at a linear pace. And so even though we can all take pride in the contributions we've made to move the ball forward, ultimately we're moving at a linear pace and the challenge is evolving at an exponential one. So even as we're making progress, the result for the end citizen isn't necessarily getting any better. In fact, it might be getting a little worse. And so as we've approached this problem over the last 2 years, I think we were very aware of that fact. And we asked ourselves, okay, what is the fire? What are the priorities that we can make to really design a system that changes that pace from linear to exponential and lays the groundwork so that you are truly solving the problem? There's a lot to go out there, and I can't do it all in today's time, but one of the key aspects of that is we need to focus on true enterprise-level, agency-wide transformation. It doesn't mean that it's a traditional waterfall project, or that we're not using modern project management concepts, but I think to the degree that it's possible, we need to be focusing on the holistic enterprise rather than sort of pinpricking little problems along the way. And to that end, Emily Murphy and Alan Thomas and Joanne Collins-Smee spent the last year forming the Centers of Excellence at the GSA. And frankly, it starts as an admitted experiment. Is it possible to drive enterprise-level change at an agency level? Well, I'm pleased to report that at least about a year into that project, the early signs are enormously positive. In fact, I'd say, just to be blunt, that the COEs are crushing it. They're doing a really fantastic work. That's a testament to the team that Emily has built at the GSA, but it's also a testament to the incredible team that Secretary Perdue has built at the USDA, serving as a lighthouse agency, under the leadership of his senior team and people like Gary Washington, who's the CIO at USDA. And over the last several months, they've been proving this model very quietly. I mean, some of you may have heard about it. It's gotten some great coverage every once in a while, but we haven't done the road show per se. And I don't think today should be anything other than an update. I don't think we're necessarily in the roadshow business for this quite yet. But I just want to say that the early signs are positive. Data centers are closing and consolidating at scale. Contact centers are being updated, not only to modern systems, but also modern techniques involving machine learning and AI. Customer service experiences are being consolidated and modernized at scale. And I think you'll see we're well on the way to fairly significant transformation of the USDA over a multi-year arc. But more than just numbers and statistics related to any specific project or budget, there's been an atmospheric change or cultural change inside the USDA and inside the Centers of Excellence. And I think those of you who are involved in that work can feel it. There's been several studies, some by FedScoop and some by other technology stakeholders related to the COEs, but also just this ecosystem more broadly, that there's something changing. And I think it's a critical mass of bipartisan support for these policy changes. This is not a political issue. This is something that this White House is doing our part on, but we're working very closely with people both sides of the aisle. I think it's a reaction of the critical mass of technology itself. A lot of the technologies that 10 years ago or 5 years ago were still emerging technologies are now relatively mature technologies. When you think about the cloud and smartphones and the list goes on, these are now relatively mature technologies with proven pathways for federal agencies to adopt at scale versus kind of being the startup equivalent 10, 15 years ago. So the technology change, and I also think that this community writ large is responsive to our ultimate customer, the American people. We all use amazing services in our everyday life created by the vibrant private sector, whether that's ride-sharing application or researching for a new home in a new and interesting way, choosing our children's school, using great digital applications. So these are the way we live our lives, and increasingly that's what we want from our government as well. The driving 2 hours to get a wet signature on a paper form just isn't acceptable to anybody anymore, and including the people in this room, including myself. So the combination of those three variables, I think, has laid the groundwork for that cultural change and that confidence boost that, yes, not only can this be done, but yes, it is happening and the ship is turning. I saw a recent survey of federal technology executives, CIOs, and also people further down the stack, and over 80% were confident that transformation would be achieved in a meaningful way in 5 years. And those kind of statistics are not something that I'd seen in the past. And so I think all of us in this room deserve some credit for making that a reality. So the Centers of Excellence are working. The ship is turning. And hopefully, over the next 6 months to a year, the projects there will further validate the sort of operational experiment, and we'll have a true enterprise change vehicle as an institutional capacity for the federal government for some time. As we all know, it's not just as simple as one program. We all live in this ecosystem either as federal employees or as vendors or as interested stakeholders and advocates. So we all know that I think far too often there's like two sets of products. This isn't always the case, but I think we've all seen it. I know it's especially frustrating to a lot of technology companies out there where they have literally best-in-class, world status, innovative products that they offer every other client but the government. And it's not because they're malicious about government. They want to sell it to the government. It's just that our regulations and our operating manual is out of date. It's like we're a retail store, and every 2 years we fire the manager because the store's not running right, but we don't change the operating manual of the store. And then we blame the manager. Well, there can always be ups and downs with any manager, but ultimately this is really about the operating manual itself. What are the rules about how the retail store runs? How are these decisions made in government? The way I like to think about this is it's a spring cleaning of an overgrown attic. You go up into the attic and there's cobwebs of policy that have been littered throughout the technology space in the government, literally since the 1970s, many of which are still on the books, still interfering with the modernization of federal technology, slowing not only technology vendors down, but also career feds who are doing their best to operate in that environment. And so, as I know you heard from Suzette Kent earlier, the federal CIO, but we have a very concerted effort to sort of clean the attic. It's messy, it takes some time, we might get some cuts in our hands or something, but we're making progress. The Cloud Smart policy, I think, is a step in that right direction, and I anticipate that there'll be many more, both streamlining and making it so, good or bad, at least there's a place to go to see the governing policy, and beyond that, fix it if it needs reform over time. One area in particular where I think we've made notable progress is on the idea of just the role of the CIO at an agency. This is something that people have been working on for a long time. In a modern organization of any size or scale, you want to have a true chief information officer, someone with the focus on that first word, a chief, someone who's actually in charge, a conductor for the orchestra. And as you may know, earlier this year, the president signed an executive order effectively ordering agencies to adopt the law, which is that the agency chief information officers should be in charge of their operations. It's not a radical concept, but I'm pleased to report that it's actually happening at agencies. We're not at 100% compliance yet, but it is the law, and they have a written order from the president, so I anticipate that we will be at 100% compliance in the near future. And what does that mean? It means that you have really talented people who can do more with their job than they could before, and also you're able to recruit really talented people to keep those jobs. We know that there's been this litany of CIO turnover over the last decade. Well, part of it is that the job in the federal government hasn't always been as good as advertised. You get the fancy title, but you don't actually have the authorities to match. We're helping to change that, and to the degree we're successful, I believe we'll recruit higher capacity CIOs to take the job, but also they'll stick in the jobs for a longer period of time. And I think we're seeing that with people, again, like Gary Washington and many others in the service today. So I guess I'd like to kind of wrap up just by saying this is a big challenge. This is something that even the definition of success is sort of ongoing, because hopefully we live in a vibrant economy where there will always be something new and something innovative that we need to adopt to as an enterprise level organization, the federal government. And so I think more than a discovery sprint, more than a one-off success, what we need is the institutional capacity to change at an exponential pace, and to do that on an ongoing basis, not just from one administration, but just as an ongoing operational capacity of the federal government heretofore. We do not ask every administration to build their own Navy from scratch, nor should we ask every administration to build their change management capacity from scratch. Fortunately, we didn't have to. We were able to build on the work of our predecessor, and I believe that our successor will be able to build upon ours in the far distant future, just so I don't get in trouble. But when that day comes, and I think for 4 or 5 administrations into the future, we want to be able to say that the United States government is able to change, is able to adopt the latest technology, whatever it may be, and that the House will no longer be on fire, so we can start focusing on getting those windows fixed and maybe repainting the outside. So thanks everybody for your time today and for the work that you do, and look forward to hearing more about this great convention. So thanks.
Posture, but if you do have a bad day, then you can really dig in and find it, and you're not going to get the Heisman from the cloud provider.
Yes, this kind of brings up an interesting point, which is when you think about cloud, and you know, I heard Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, once say that the cloud is not just some abstract notion; it represents a fundamental extension of your organization's infrastructure. And in that vein, what I'm really saying is that we've talked about this notion for many years about the vanishing perimeter, the fact that we're in a world where the perimeter is effectively dead. Do you see that situation accelerating? And if so, what are some of the compensating controls you think we ought to be putting in place?
Yeah, we do see that accelerating. I think there's still a place for perimeter defense in the larger picture, but we're increasingly see it move more toward endpoint security, and some of the things that some really creative folks can do some really good stuff with endpoints, so that you can, when an event is occurring, you can nail it right down to that box, and you know where that box is. And so that's really helpful.
So I imagine now, and I hate, I'm going to say the buzzword bingo word of the day, which is AI. I'm sure it's come up very frequently today. We've heard about trying to apply AI to solve certain problems in the endpoint context. Maybe it's detecting threats or being able to help navigate the sea of information. Do you see that as a critical part of digital transformation at DHS and even beyond?
Yeah, I do. I think we've been thinking about how to utilize AI to help us better defend. I think you have to be careful about, okay, I got to go get me some AI. Well, we were talking earlier about, well, I got to go get me some blockchain. Well, what the heck does that mean? Right? So how are you going to use it? How are you going to implement it? How are you going to make it useful to you? And so what we've been doing is we've been thinking about AI in a couple of ways. Number one is AI can be used very effectively, we think, to ascertain patterns of bad actor behavior, and in a way that a human couldn't possibly do, because there are so many variables and so many data points that are running around to do that. So we think that can help, and I think there's also a big concern that AI is going to replace humans. I don't think that's going to happen. In the movie 2001.
I'm sorry, Dave.
I can't, Dave. I'm sorry. I can't let you open the door, Dave. It's not going to replace the human. I think there's a human element to this, that AI can help us get to a point where now a human can really get a full understanding of what they're looking at, and then take steps if steps are necessary, or plan ahead to say, I see this actor doing this here, here, and here, and how can we get ahead of that actor? And they can do it at speed, which is really the critical element here, I think.
So I guess the two key takeaways from me are blockchain and AI are not the answer. So
not the complete answer.
Not the complete answer. So maybe I'd love to double click on that a bit. I mean, if you look at something like AI, it definitely seems to hold a lot of promise. I mean, I believe it can move the needle. Maybe not as much as people might think it can move the needle, but from a practitioner's perspective, as you think about putting these technologies into the fold, what are some of the major pitfalls people have to worry about? Because I think the reality is that people are going to go out and say, I'm going to go buy me some AI. They're going to have a solution looking for a problem at times. What I really want to get at is what are some of the things we ought to be worrying about as we think about deploying these new approaches in AI and beyond to try to protect our national infrastructure?
I think just like any instantiation of is Dave calling me? We saved Dave. I think anytime you start to put something like AI, it's new, it's wonderful, and all that. You start to put it in place. You've got to think about how's it going to impact my training pipeline. Are my people going to be able to understand how to use it? People are going to be worried about their job. Is this going to replace me? And I think you've got to have that built into your technology roadmap so that you understand what the impacts are going to be, and really, what do you want to get out of it? You know, if you just say, I'm going to buy AI, well, so what? What's it going to do? How's it going to help me? And we're thinking about it from the perspective of using AI to help us sort through the kill chain attack framework things to get us a better handle on patterns that, like I said earlier, humans just can't figure out.
Right,
I mean, at least fast enough. Humans can figure them out, but it might take me 3 days where it's going to take the machine 3 seconds.
Right, so it's almost like you kind of hinted at the classic conundrum of people, process, and technology working together. How do we ensure that we have the right technologies in place, but we have the people who understand how to use them and make get the most value out of them, and also have the process in place to ensure that we're doing the right things with that technology?
You hit on one of the key points, and that's people. How do we get the workforce to utilize these great, wonderful new technologies? That's going to be a game changer over the next 10 or 15 years, I think. And I've been in a number of different discussions where we're talking about K-12 STEM education. We're talking about different qualifications and different ways to make sure that people are capable of utilizing some of these things. And then once you get them, how do you keep them? We're challenged in the government to keep people because we can't pay as high as the commercial sector can. So we focus on finding really good people and then keeping them engaged. And the people that we get generally are quite good, and they come with a mission focus. And we talk about that all the time. How do you stay engaged with your workforce? And then as you start thinking through AI and cloud and all these other things, making sure that they're capable of dealing with these new technologies and how they fit into your mission. Because at the end of it, for us, for commercial types out here, it's all about the bottom line. For us, it's about the mission, but the same thing. It's business or it's mission. It's the same thing. How do you get the job done? And so if you can engage your workforce in that and make sure that if you got a good training and development pipeline for them, keep them engaged in the work. We've had some good success with that over the last year. Our retention is pretty good. So I think that's going to be one of the big things, is making sure that we line up people to be able to use this great new stuff when we start bringing that great new stuff in to do mission.
Right, so if I had to kind of highlight, I think one of the key trends you're bringing up is that when you look at any form of digital transformation, there's always a new buzzword that excites people. Then there's a reason for having people to work on that area. So AI is now one of these sort of latest, or I guess not even AI is getting to be kind of passe. Blockchain's the new AI, if you will. But in each of these cases, it's hard to find that right expertise because everyone's interested in working in that area, which means that any talent you look after is going to be recruited heavily by a million other companies with very lucrative offers. But I love the idea, by the way, of really having that mission focus, because I think a lot of folks, especially in cybersecurity, tend to be very mission driven in what they try to achieve.
Yeah, you're right. And I think at the end of it all, K-12 education, colleges and universities, we've had great success in some of the 2-year schools that have a cyber focus. We've just kicked off a pilot to help us identify new talent. We have the federal government hiring process, which is sometimes a challenge. I'll be generous. But what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get some of these folks and actually test them, and put their hands on the keyboard and I got your resume. It's got all these tickets on it. Great, wonderful. That gets you in the door. Now prove it to me. put your hands on the keyboard and show me that you can do what you say you can do. And we're going to try to work on some of that too. And then a part of that pilot is not just the aptitude and the prove the ability, but it's also a training tool that has some really good measures in it, so that we can keep track of people's progress, and we can do things like development over time and see how we're doing, see how the tools work, and see how our folks are doing.
Fantastic. You're sitting next to Deborah Diaz at lunch today, and we were talking about this very notion where there's now an interest in looking beyond your typical core skill sets. So rather than just looking for people with, let's say, a core computer science degree, can you find somebody with a biology degree or something that may be adjacent, but where they have the right level of maybe mental acumen and curiosity to succeed in new endeavors, because the world is changing constantly.
I think you said the key word. It's curiosity. It's can I get folks that really want to get into this hip deep? The Brits did a study on some of this methodology, and they did a test where they did an aptitude examination, and they brought a bunch of people in. They put them through an 8-week boot camp where they really tested them hard, and you know who came out at the top was a fellow who had never seen cyber before. He was a bartender. So he had really great aptitude. He had really great, I'm going to focus on this. And the key thing that they told us was his curiosity was off the charts. He just wanted to try to find out what was going on. And so they had really good success with that. So we're going to start thinking about doing that too with our workforce.
So what you're saying is next time I have a big bar tab, I can use it as a recruiting expense if I need to and submit it in. So.
Yeah, depends how much he takes off of it. Aptitude.
So, we've mentioned two key buzzwords so far. We've talked about AI and blockchain. This wouldn't be complete if I didn't use a third buzzword du jour, which is IoT. Certainly something we talked about earlier. And what's your perspective on the breadth of IoT and also the level of exposure that it might create for our national infrastructure?
IoT is has a significant potential to improve how we work. Distributed workforces are the way we're going to be going constantly. It's getting more and more distributed. And the IoT creates a significant increase in attack surface. And I'm not sure in all cases that security's been built in on the front end with some of these devices, which makes it even more challenging. But what it comes down to at the end, I mean, if you have an assumption that the IoT device is useful, is going to help business or mission, it's reasonably secure, the big challenge you still have is you got a human using it. And stupid user tricks are still the worst challenge that we have. Clicking on the wrong link or opening something that you shouldn't open or what have you. And quite honestly, the bad guys are getting pretty good at making it look like they're sending me an email from USAA and they want to check the status of my insurance. I get about 5 a week. And they are getting really good at that. But by the same token, the companies now, USAA, I'll be honest, they're good. They're getting really good at recognizing that, and they've built security measures into the thing that allows me to do my banking on my phone in a way that is secure. And they have the ways for me to say, hey, I think this is a phishing email, so I send it to them, and I'll get feedback from them about that. And there's a couple of other companies that do, Capital One, really good at doing that as well. So I think if you put all that together, I think IoT, although still a tremendous attack surface, if we start doing the right things and we start talking to people about your behavior when you use that, then we'll be better off, and we'll be able to take advantage of the fact that we've got some of these devices that make life easier.
So I think what I hear you saying is that humans have a flawed operating system at some level. But I'd love to get kind of even pushing beyond that.
I mean,
well, I'm just trying to summarize. But kind of, you raised a really interesting question here, which is when I think of IoT, people often think of the Internet of Things. But there's even a step beyond that, which is IoT can really represent the identity of things. The fact that there's often a human potentially behind all of that, and we're easy to fool at times. Mm-hmm. How do you look at the whole space of managing identities? I think we're going to see a world where the number of identities are exploding, and even though there may be a single person, they may have multiple personas throughout an organization.
You know, I've been thinking a little bit about that. How do we know that it's really Zuli on the end of the IoT? I think there's tremendous promise in biometrics. I was with a friend last night who was showing me, he works for a biometrics company, he was showing me some of the cool stuff that their company is doing. And that's all really, really good. You got to remember that there is an element of security involved in that too, in that, okay, so if I've got everybody's face print and their fingerprints and stuff, how do I secure that? How do I make sure that that doesn't get pinched and then moved over here so that the bad guys can use it when they, to break into stuff? That's a concern. But I think there's a lot of promise in the biometrics, and I don't think biometrics in and of itself, by itself, is the whole answer. I think there's got to be some other factor that's involved. Whether it's as much of a pain as it is, they send you the code that you put in. But there's smart people out here I know that will figure out how to do that in a way that's easy and useful. And then when the user becomes a part of the equation, it's simple for the user to understand, and they're not going to make as many mistakes because it's easy to use.
So I mean, just a great segue, because I feel that right now, when people think about cybersecurity, they often get caught up in the security versus convenience and usability. But to me, it seems like you're kind of hitting on a key idea here, which is that when you take this sort of risk-driven view, you could potentially provide the right trade-off between security and convenience. Did I understand you correctly, or am I kind of?
No, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. That is exactly the view to take. What's the risk here? Is this a huge risk if I do X, or is it not? And how do you balance those out? And at the end of the day, it comes back to, am I able to complete mission? Is it going to cost me a lot of money, or does it only cost me a little money? And balancing that risk based upon what your architecture looks like, based upon what you're trying to do as a business, all of those things come into the calculus. And it leads to one of the things that I say all the time, is that in any organization, it's not the CIO that owns this problem. It's the whole leadership team, the board, the CEO. Everybody has to be invested in understanding the risk that they have, and then how do they use all these great, wonderful new tools to do business better. And if they think like that, I think from the start, you're in a better position, and you can better defend yourself, and you put better processes in place, and your people make fewer errors because they become a part of the solution instead of the part of the problem. All of those things kind of fit together.
So I think, you kind of alluded to something, and I'd love to kind of ask you more deeply, and maybe as a kind of a final thought, to what extent do you see cybersecurity as either an enabler or an inhibitor of digital transformation?
It can be both. But I think it depends upon the mindset of the people that are doing both. And I think what they've got to do is you've got to start thinking about security at the beginning of the development process, so that it's built in on the front end. And there's those trade-offs that are good. Sometimes the security guys are going to have something. Okay, so how do I work around that as the business, so that it's still easy for my users to understand and follow the rules? A constant iteration of development along those lines. It can't be at the end. Okay, I built this great application. Oh, security, take a look and make sure it's okay with you. That doesn't work anymore. I mean, we know that doesn't work. We see it all the time. And so it's a balance between the convenience piece and the security piece, and making sure that you as a user is part of this bigger solution, because it's not an onerous process. Oh, and by the way, the security guys are helping you get to yes. It's like finding a good lawyer. A good lawyer can get you to yes, right?
We started off on legal advice, and we kind of end on legal advice. I think you're spot on that this is really a journey when it comes to digital transformation and security transformation. There may be no sort of given, well-defined end, but if we're not constantly improving along the way, we're not doing the right thing. So I think that is the ultimate lesson that I learned.
You're absolutely right. It's a cooperative effort along the way.
Fantastic. And I love the fact that we're here at public and private sector cooperating together to help make this a reality. So thank you, John. Thank you all for listening in and for spending your first 20 minutes after lunch with us.
Thank you.
I got so pumped, I just spilled a whole bottle of water on me. That was awesome. Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you, guys. Okay, our next speaker is sure to dazzle us. He's the Senior Director of National Technology Strategy at VMware. He's going to be talking about software-defined, the ubiquitous digital foundation. Please put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to Robert Ames.
Great, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Goldie, for the introduction. It's really fantastic to be here on this afternoon, and it's super fantastic.
Latest exciting factor, but we really never quite got infrastructure right. So I personally find infrastructure sexy. Now, I was edited by corporate. I wasn't supposed to say that, but I said it anyway. Right. So going back, I believe many of my customers that I've engaged with from VMware really see us as a compute virtualization company. And I understand that. And this was a big deal, by the way. I was at VMware with Michelle many years ago. I mean, at IBM many years ago, and we had the mainframe, and we had all these powerful high-end Unix servers. And that virtualization's been around for decades, but nobody could figure out how to unleash virtualization on x86. And a PhD, a professor in Stanford and 3 PhD students found the way. And this was really the beginning. It was all about being able to consolidate workloads on inefficient servers, drive power savings, drive automation, drive resilience. And that's really where I think a lot of people think VMware still is. This is how we see ourselves today. And it's quite a dramatic change, and a lot has happened. So those little servers you could almost see on the left side in that purple cloud, that's the hybrid or on-premise cloud. That's really VMware's bread and butter. But since then, we have expanded greatly to virtualize storage, because a lot of these nodes that are shipped to create the virtual server infrastructure have high-performance storage, and we can create virtualized high-performance SAN, vSAN on top of that. Then, VMware made a really, really brilliant acquisition a few years back. This was a company called Nicira, which now forms NSX, which is our software-defined networking. So basically, all the value we kind of know and understand about server virtualization can be applied to the network. And this dynamism that of a very flexible and resilient infrastructure is very, very real. So this was a great sort of series of innovative ads. And of course, the world is always changing, and VMware was getting disrupted. And I like to kind of think of us as the David Bowie of IT, because we're constantly evolving and constantly addressing new threats and new concerns and absorbing them, all in the name of serving our customers and helping them serve their mission. So public clouds came along. And certainly, this is a compelling paradigm. And all of our customers are very interested in leveraging and exploiting the powers of public cloud. But maybe that meant that that would take workloads away from VMware. But a couple years ago, VMware found a way to partner with Amazon and create the VMC on AWS, where in a sense, VMware customers could run the entire VMware stack natively on Amazon public clouds. So all of a sudden, you've got this true hybrid, or as my colleague Lou and I like to talk about, hybridity. That's a new word for you. And flexibility across these clouds. Now, of course, Amazon themselves are being disrupted, and there are other capabilities emerging in public cloud constantly. And we are working to enable our customers across all of these. Right now, with Microsoft, for example, we empower the end user solutions, the mobility capabilities. And with Google, there's a natural sort of paradigm for the developer frameworks. And PKS, Pivotal Container Services, is a service that we do there. So people can start to leverage the better power of these clouds. Now, the world didn't stop there. We now have this realization that the public clouds don't serve edge people. How do we help people in remote and distant environments that don't have an IT staff? And so you're seeing these solutions come out, and VMware just announced at VMworld something called Project Dimension, which is essentially, think of it, and it's a partnership with Dell. Think of it as t-shirt-sized data centers in a box that you plug in, and they're managed by the VMware cloud. You don't need to have skilled IT staff. You can get the benefit of all that virtualization, and the data stays on your side. So we've created, and on the bottom, as you can see, telco is obviously emerging very much as well as we go to 5G. They want to exploit this virtualization. Now, the glue across all of these is this network virtualization I talked about. The ability to have a seamless, secure, connected space with micro-segmentation, very fine-grained security, is really powerful and enabling, and gives us that ability to reach up as we go beyond that sort of base platform into the application layer and ultimately the end users. You see those little locks that marketing puts on the right. That's a concept of security, end-to-end security, and it's very real. Now, the application space. So we're used to these sort of legacy applications that you see on the left, one application, one virtual machine, but then disruption from containers come. And Docker and all of those kinds of infrastructures that your customers or our customers are trying to use. How do we wrap those? How do we empower our customers in a production-ready space to manage those? And that's part of our infrastructure offerings. And we are constantly, I sit in research at VMware, trying to figure out how to make that more efficient, more manageable, more secure, wrapping those containers with that micro-segmentation in that virtual network space. And the world is moving to SaaS, and it constantly will change. And we are starting to deliver more and more products as SaaS, as VMware as a business, and we are also helping our customers to figure out how to leverage those and have common command and control and insight across that. And then finally at the top, any device. So another major acquisition that was very bright by VMware was AirWatch. This was about managing mobile devices. And that, combined with the network virtualization, has given us that reach to be able to have a very legitimate end user management solution portfolio under Workspace ONE, which you're all, now many of you, I can see your phones are working here, right? The enterprise boundary is no boundary at all, and you're wanting to work. You're wanting to get work done during this talk, and you're on some public Wi-Fi. How do we manage that? How do we secure you? We have that solution in our Workspace ONE space. Now this moves to IoT because that micro sort of management agent that we have under AirWatch gives us that true reach to be able to manage, in partnership again with Dell, through some gateways to manage those heterogeneous endpoints and provide common command and control. So this is a sort of very high-end architecture view. I'm going to take it a little bit deeper, but very briefly. The point of this chart that I want to make to you is that it's a heterogeneous world. There never will be a single solution. As much as you have these sort of paradigms, public only, cloud only, all those sorts of things, the reality is the dictates of mission require heterogeneity. And what we want to do at VMware across all of these layers is provide a consistent infrastructure feel. Doesn't matter what's below you. Consistent operational tools, practices, insight, security, and so on, a consistent developer experience, so they don't really care what's going on before. And I'm going to add one thing to this marketing chart, a consistent user experience. So it doesn't really matter where you are. It doesn't really matter what network you're on. It doesn't really matter what tools you're using. You want to have that same look and feel. And that's really what our vision and our focus on delivery is. Now, once we succeed in this, this is really the what. These are the kind of tools. These are the capabilities. But really what our customers are driving to is the why, their mission. And we believe that this ubiquitous digital foundation really is the enabler. It's the thing that unleashes the innovation that we're all talking about. And I know these terms have been used today. I heard them just in the previous talk. So we know from our customers across the globe that they're trying to do some of these things. And just a little view within VMware, we're trying to enable and empower these, and we're spending a lot of time and money and resource to empower these. So on the left, looking at the analytics space, data analytics, machine learning, and fundamentally artificial intelligence. That's, as we heard earlier, that's the buzzword of the day. Really, we have two focuses there. Empowering that infrastructure through VMware. How do we embrace all the new processors and GPUs and so on that are coming in and allow our customers to have that common management? But the second piece of this, if you remember, we live down in that low-level hypervisor. We see everything. We're starting to use that data to provide ever more intelligence, insight, efficiency, prediction, so on, to our customers as they try to figure out how to work across these infrastructures. At the top, serverless, edge, Internet of Things. I kind of bunched them together. This concept of disconnected, disaggregated infrastructure. How do we manage those? And I talked a little bit earlier about how we're wrapping security around those, how we're wrapping reach. And I can also say one of the things I'm most proud of is we're partnering with NSF and academics to kind of figure out how we manage in this environment through collaborative research. And blockchain. Can't leave this conference without talking about blockchain, right? You may have seen VMware just open source something called Project Concord. This came about because as infrastructure experts, we heard our customers wanting to make use of blockchain to deliver on their missions, but it's very power hungry. There are lots of terms out there, but the latest I've seen that I like to talk about is that to empower blockchain and ultimately Bitcoin, the power use would run Argentina for a year. It's ridiculous. Doesn't scale. It's very expensive. So how could we get the benefit of this disaggregated model of trust whilst providing security, the same sort of security and massive power efficiency? And through our research team, we have a couple algorithmic developers who figured out something, and it's very researchy sounding, small Byzantine fault tolerance. And this is instead of all the aggressive hard work that you have to do to compute Bitcoins, this is really a different way of voting and understanding who's participating in that ecosystem, but it provides you the same level of security and control at orders of magnitude less power and orders of magnitude faster. So I don't have time, unfortunately, today to address every one of these blobs. But what I do want to say is that while I work for VMware Research that is based out in Palo Alto, I am local to this area in Washington. And I am considered a resource for the government. And I have another colleague, Louis Shepard, who isn't here today, but there's really two of us. And the whole purpose of this investment is to make sure that VMware Research understands the needs and concerns of our customers, and our customers understand where VMware is going, how we're investing in the future. So consider us a resource that's available for you and people to be able to bring to your customers, or if your customers in here, to come talk to you about tech innovation. We've both spent a lot of time in this space and are very eager to share the message and really understand what your problems are and reflect them back to our organization. So with that, I'm going to pause and I thank you very much, and I'll be around should you have any further questions. Thank you.
Let's give him another round of applause. Excellent. You should go teach. You're very professor-like. I like it. Okay, so I'm pleased to announce our closing speaker for the day. He's going to be talking about mobilizing innovation to secure the homeland. He's the senior official performing the duties of the Undersecretary for Science and Technology at DHS. Please put your hands together and give a really warm welcome to Bill Bryan.
Good afternoon. Wow, what a nice crowd. You know, I got to tell you, in a crowd like this, dealing on a topic of technologies, there's got to be a lot of subject matter experts in the room. And out of all those subject matter experts, there's got to be some that are really, really smart. And out of some that are really, really smart, there's probably just a very, very small handful that are truly subject matter experts. So why do I say all that? Because I'm not any of them. All right, but I will tell you this. If you listen to my title, Senior Official Performing the Duties of the Undersecretary for Science and Technology, I bet you're the only one in the room with the title sop dust, right? So, but I'm willing to trade that with any of you who are truly an expert in this area. So I do want to thank you. It's great to be here. I think the topic is timely. It's relevant. It's very important for the time that we're in right now. You've heard today from a lot of government leaders and how they're investing in technology going forward to provide more effective services while adapting to the complex environments of the threats that we're facing. And frankly, with not much history or guidance to go on, right? As we see these complexes of these threats change. So collectively, we need to continuously modify or monitor and refine our understanding of how emerging technologies can improve our capabilities, but also understanding that there are bad actors out there who are going to take these technologies that are being developed for the good of mankind and use them in nefarious purposes against us. And this is an important issue that we at the Department of Homeland Security have to face. So the hackings, the corrupt data, unauthorized accesses to our systems are all man-made, and the consequences of these things can be very severe, as I understand you've heard throughout the day. So I'd like to address how DHS Science and Technology is positioned to meet the challenges and the opportunities of this digital age that we now live in. Now, I'd like to focus on two key areas that I'm going to focus my talk on today as we to demonstrate how we're responding to this digital transformation. Number one, how the security landscape is changing and what impact does that have on our security operations. And number two, how S&T's research and development model is having to change to go along with that. Because we have to meet those rapid innovation cycles that are changing. We have to meet the changing nature of the threat. We are a law enforcement agency. So when our customers come to us and say we need something, they really needed it yesterday. So how do we take R&D that we've known and loved, and how do we apply that in really a tactical operational environment? So first, some background. As the R&D arm of the Department of Homeland Security, we focus on a lot of high priority, very complex issues, but they're all driven by the requirements of our customer base. So all those components within the Department of Homeland Security, we also are also the only federal R&D activity for first responders. So we also deal with that community, as well as the 16 sectors as they channel their requirements into the department as well. We consider all of them customers of S&T. So whether it's improving our first responders' safety or effectiveness, whether it's mitigating impacts to natural disasters, or whether it's detecting explosives and threats to those who are traveling public, these are all areas that we're involved with. So we understand that having the right solution in the hands of the security operators and the decision makers can save time, can limit property damage, and most of all, can save lives. And that's really the focus of what we do. So our goal is to deliver powerful solutions as quickly as possible. And an equation I like to use is diverse perspectives or opinions with shared goals equals very powerful solutions. And you're going to hear me use that theme throughout my talk. So we do this by striving for excellence in science and engineering, by engaging with industry innovators to deliver these cutting-edge capabilities. Many of you out there are the innovators that we, frankly, have not effectively tapped into like we should in the government to be able to solve some of our problems. So this takes me to my first point, the changing security landscape and the impact on our security operations. Linking our physical world and the internet or virtual world, these digital advances are having a significant impact on our daily lives and how we live. This connectivity is improving essential government functions like public safety, energy, water, telecommunications, transportation, and it goes on and on. And with the increase of sensors and devices and analytics, cities today have more tools, to improve their services, reduce costs, and serve as living laboratories for innovative growth. So connectivity across our lives makes this both a quality of life issue, but it also makes it a security challenge for us in the department. So as the use of smart products change how cities operate, it also alters our homeland security landscape. Because of the connectivity and the digital dependence on the systems and networks that enable our society and commerce to keep moving, our nation's security and resilience is often tested and at risk. So disasters can have cascading impacts on city services that we've seen very recently, where issues of the economy, security, urban planning, and resilience are often directly connected. So consider what we're seeing today with, and you've probably heard these terms all day long. If you haven't, I'm going to repeat them. So listen. So looking at machine learning, looking at artificial intelligence, looking at blockchain, these are all things I want to go into a little bit about what we're doing in each one of these areas. But with regards to emergency situations, machine learning and artificial intelligence in the forms of autonomous systems, in the forms of wearable technologies, are changing the way we reduce risks, how we improve decision-making, and how we drive efficiencies. So regarding the analytics, the visualization, and predictive modeling, officers and agents right now in the field have the capabilities to identify and match individuals to very large databases using algorithms. These solutions are now part of our operations, and they're extending from public safety to airports and even along our borders, and they're using that now. We're excited about our artificial intelligence research and development efforts through a project called Audrey, S&T. How many have heard of Audrey? Anybody heard of Audrey? Outstanding. So I can tell you whatever I want. You won't know if I'm telling you the truth or not. But through this project called Audrey, S&T is investing in technology to improve our first responders' decision-making and communication. So from the edge, the very edge of an incident, all the way through that command and control, where life-saving decisions need to be made within seconds, Audrey is helping in this way. So 2 weeks ago, S&T was in Sacramento, California, and we were testing the progression of various different fire scenarios using different fuels and different materials. Data from these tests are now being programmed and built into Audrey's capacity to communicate life-saving information in near real time based on that data we were receiving. Audrey can then synthesize that data and relay critical information back to the citizens and to the public safety officials. So the potential for embedding Audrey's sensors into firefighters' equipment, for example, in their clothing, is being experimented and explored right now to enable greater situational awareness of hazardous environments that will ultimately save the lives, not just save the lives of our first responders, but also save the lives of the public that they're protecting. So given the many use cases for artificial intelligence, S&T is seeking to evaluate the practical applications of both AI and machine learning across the DHS mission space. Now, at the same time, there is a dark side to AI and machine learning, as I mentioned earlier on. And this requires us to ensure future innovation cycles are safe, that they're secure, and that they're reliable. So let's talk a little bit about blockchain. Blockchain advances provide added integrity and security to the process of securely moving blocks of information along a chronological data chain, right? So from a government perspective, blockchain technology holds potential for greater transparency and auditing in several areas, whether it's public service organizations or operations, whether it's increased supply chain visibility to combat counterfeit products, or whether it's automation of paper-based processes to serve the citizens and your organizations more effectively and efficiently. These are all some of the benefits of this. And we're helping our DHS components better understand their potential use cases for leveraging this technology and how they can best leverage our R&D expertise to acquire these technologies to get the needed results that they need out in the field. So a couple of examples. S&T is leading a proof of concept deployment for the U.S. Border Patrol to evaluate how blockchain can ensure that imagery and sensory data coming in from their cameras are authentic and unaltered. This particular technology was identified through our Silicon Valley Innovation Program. And it's actually out in the field right now being tested and tried in a real operational environment. We're also conducting proof of concept deployments with the CBP's Office of Trade, focusing on applying blockchain for shipping, for logistics, and for customs operations. So the increase of new capabilities is driven as driving more efficiencies with DHS operations, and it's also helping our communities build that culture of preparedness. Let me share. Oh, great. That is awesome. You were just waiting, weren't you? I'll keep it up here so I can spill it. You watch, it'll happen. I can guarantee it. I was watching Goldie. I'm going to be with you. You watch. I'm going to up you one. So let me share why all this matters, especially during a hurricane season. S&T's Flood Apex program, for those of you who've never heard about that, is working closely with FEMA to integrate new and emerging technologies that actually build our flood and surge resilience capability. To enhance resilience, we're leveraging flood sensors, remote sensing, analytics, and elements of artificial intelligence to reduce the flood fatalities across the country. This work includes using deep learning techniques and satellite imagery to produce building footprints, actual from space, looking at buildings, developing footprints for these actual buildings. And these are needed for FEMA to help them in their recovery operations. So this work is contributing to nationally recognized standards for flood-proofing products, including waterproofing material, as well as other smart sensors in this mission space. So the digitization of our society is more multifaceted than we think. Connecting sensors and connected sensors that currently monitor water levels and warn of potential floods can also track levels of pollution. It can also